Hey guys, tonight we're taking a not-so-cozy journey into something most history books don't spend nearly enough time on. What it was actually like to survive winter in the Middle Ages. Spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. I mean, you might. But statistically, odds aren't in your favour. There's no insulation, no hot cocoa, no central heating, just frostbite and folk tales and an almost comical number of saints people prayed to not to freeze to death. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Oh, and I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Drop it in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The wind's changed. You felt it this morning, crisp, dry and sharp, like it had been honed on a blade overnight. The frost on the edges of the thatch roof sparkles like crushed glass. You don't even need to step outside to know. Winter's arrived. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders. It's made of thick wool, scratchy against your neck and permanently scented with smoke. There's still warmth coming from the hearth in the centre of the room, but not much. The fire died sometime before dawn. You can see your own breath as you lean forward to prod the coals with a stick, trying to coax some life back into them. The rest of the family stirs under the same heavy fur coverlet. You all sleep together for warmth. Limbs tangled, breath mixing in the cold air. It's not cosy, it's survival. You stretch, muscles stiff, back sore from the hard-packed dirt floor. Your toes are numb, again. Outside, the sky's a leaden smear. The sun doesn't rise so much as it just appears, reluctantly, through clouds the colour of old pewter. By the time it climbs above the thatch rooftops, it'll already feel like it's on its way back down. Daylight is shrinking like salted meat. Each morning starts darker. Each night creeps in earlier. You start measuring your time not in hours, but in how many logs are left in the stack, and whether you can afford to burn one. The first winter task is obvious. You need water. The well isn't far, but the wooden bucket handle is icy, and the rope burns your hands as you lower it. There's a crust of ice along the inside of the stone well mouth. You chip it off with a rock. Then you wait, shivering, as the bucket hits the bottom. When you haul it up again, the water sloshes like cold iron in your grip. By now, the village is coming alive, if you can call it that. Smoke dribbles from chimneys and crooked stone flues. Dogs bark with that hoarse winter rasp. Children scream and bicker in the distance, bundled like squat haystacks in layers of patched cloth. No one walks quickly. There's no point. You're not going to outrun the cold. You spot old Martin limping toward the chapel. He has one eye and half a nose, thanks to a frostbite incident when he was young, or so people say. You wave, he doesn't wave back. His hands are wrapped in what looks like torn linen and rabbit fur. There's always a kind of grim tension on the first real morning of winter. It's like the whole village holds its breath. Who's going to make it this time? Who's got enough firewood, enough salted pork, enough nerve to last through the long nights? Your neighbour has already nailed shut the broken window in his cottage with a strip of cowhide. Another is digging a drainage ditch knee-deep in cold mud, trying to keep the runoff from flooding his root cellar. Every move is about making it through. No one talks much. It's not rudeness. It's energy conservation. You head back inside just as the sky spits the first snow of the season. It falls lazily, like it's remembering how to do it. Just a few flurries at first. By nightfall, it'll be a silent white sheet. You shake off your cloak, stamp your boots, and duck under the low lintel. The hearth has caught, barely. Your little sister is crouched beside it, hands out, face pale and waxy. She looks at you without speaking. You give her a small nod. There's not much food this morning. A bit of porridge left from yesterday, crusted in the pot, but you scrape it off and stir it with a splash of the well water. It's warmish, which is enough. There's a single candle left from the last market day. You don't light it. Not yet. Candles are for darkness, and the grey outside isn't quite there. You'll ration it like gold, like bread, like breath. Now that the first frost has hit, no one leaves food unguarded. Mice and worse are looking for anything edible. You set small traps in the corners with bits of oat as bait. If you catch a rat, you'll eat it. You won't be happy about it, but you'll do it. Winter's like that. It strips you down to the part of yourself that wants to survive. no matter what. The irony is, it didn't even used to be this bad. People still talk about the old winters. Back in the Roman days, things were warmer, better. You're not sure if that's true or just the old folks romanticising the past. What you know is that something called the Little Ice Age is starting to set in across Europe, though you'd never call it that. For you, it's just another brutal season, colder than the last. Even the animals know it. The chickens huddle together in the coop. The pigs are restless. The goat looks offended by the snow. You bundle up again and head out to check on them crunching across the hard ground. There's a myth in the village that the first snow determines the fate of the season. If it comes early, the winter is cruel. If it's late, it'll be mild. But this one, right on time. The kind of timing that doesn't bring comfort, just confirmation. You scoop a handful of snow off the fence post, let it melt in your palm, then you lick it. It tastes like sky and ash. You sigh, turn toward the low sun, and feel exactly what it is to brace for 4 long months of endurance. It's only just begun. You wake before dawn the next morning, because your breath is visible in the air and your back feels like it's been punched by the floor. You slept in your clothes again. Not out of laziness, there's just no point taking them off. Stripping down is for warmer months, or dreams. Not this, not now. Your tunic is stiff in places from yesterday's sweat, but it's better than freezing. You wiggle your toes inside stiff leather shoes that barely qualify as boots. They're lined with straw, and the straw's already damp. So that's how your day starts, with wet straw between your toes. The fire went out sometime during the night, and the hearth is cold and sulking. You try to rekindle it with what little kindling you have left. Dry grass, bark chips, and one miraculous pine cone you've been saving like a saint's tooth. The flame catches eventually, but it's sluggish. Pathetic. Still, it's something. Your hands hover over it, trembling slightly from the chill that hasn't left your bones since October. You stretch and stand up slowly. The thatched roof overhead has grown a crown of frost like it's aging with you. Moisture from last night's breath and cooking smoke has frozen into sparkling icicles hanging from the rafters. It's pretty in a way, pretty and miserable. You brush frost off your blanket, roll it tight and prop it against the wall to keep it dry. Moisture ruined everything in winter. Wood, cloth, food, even spirits. A beam of light slants through the gaps in the wooden wall, but it's thin and useless. The sun is up, technically, but it's not offering anything warm. Outside, there's a film of snow dusting the thatch rooftops, and you already know it's going to stay there all day. Nothing will melt. Not this month. Probably not the next. Your house is small, just one room, with low ceilings and walls made of wattle and daub. The daub is flaking in one corner, revealing the straw beneath. Your breath fogs in the space like mist, and there's a draft that always finds your ankles no matter how many rags you stuff under the door. You live with your mother, your younger sister, and your grandmother, who hasn't moved much in 2 days. You're not sure if it's because of her aching joints or something worse. She's hunched on her mat near the hearth, wrapped in an old cloak that used to belong to your father. The one he wore to the fields, the one he was buried in, well, he was supposed to be. But your mother pulled it off him before they lowered him into the frozen ground. She said he wouldn't need it anymore, and he would have agreed. You believed her. You still do. There's a sound above, the roof creaking, not from wind, from cold. The thatch is tightening, brittle as dead grass. You keep an eye on it, hoping nothing breaks loose. Rethatching, eh? Roof in winter isn't just hard, it's practically impossible, and you don't have spare straw anyway, or time. You put a pot on the hearth and toss in the last handful of dried onion skins and some stale root vegetables. The smell isn't bad, just thin. You'd trade a toe for some salt pork, but you're saving what little you have for the end of the week. For now, the watery stew will do. It has to. People today don't think about how much wood it takes to heat a house when it's freezing outside. You do. You think about it all the time, because no one in your family has the strength or the time to chop more right now, and what you have stacked in the lean-to is already shrinking. The logs hiss on the fire when you throw them in because they're damp. Of course they are. Everything is damp. You step outside to relieve yourself and instantly regret it. The wind slices across your face like a blade made of teeth. Your nose runs, and it freezes on your upper lip. Charming. You do your business behind a shed where the snow is packed yellow from weeks of the same routine. You don't look at it. You just go back inside. Your fingers go numb about 3 times a day in this weather. You've learned to tuck them under your arms and wait until the pins and needles return. It's better than the alternative, losing feeling completely, which might mean you're halfway to frostbite. It happened to a boy your age 2 winters ago. He lost 3 fingers. The village healer tried wrapping them in boiled wool soaked in goose fat, but they still turned black. He works as a shepherd now. Barely. There's no insulation in your home, obviously. The walls leak cold air the way old lungs leak coughs. You've patched them with cloth, mud, even moss, but none of it helps much. And forget windows. Your house has one, but it's just a hole with a wooden shutter you close at night. During the day it lets in light and lets out warmth, which is unfortunate because you have so little of either. At noon you head to the woods to gather kindling. It's a short walk, but the snow makes every step harder. You have to conserve energy. You can't sweat too much in this cold. Sweat is dangerous. It gets into your clothes and freezes fast. If you're not careful, it'll freeze to your skin. The trees stand like skeletal sentries. You scrape bark from birches and snap off dry twigs where you can find them. It's getting harder. Everyone's been scouring these woods since the cold started. You find a dead branch half buried in snow, wrestle it loose, and carry it on your shoulder like a prize. It'll last you maybe 2 nights. There's a debate in the village, always is, about whether sealing your home too tight in winter traps evil spirits. Some say cold air keeps the demons out. Others say drafts let them in. You personally don't care. If a demon can heat the room, it's welcome. You return home to find your grandmother coughing. You make her drink. Broth. And she smiles, faint and crooked. She tells you this winter is worse than the last, and you believe her. She says it like a prayer, like a curse. Later, when the sun dips and the air thickens again, you huddle by the hearth with your sister and listen to your mother tell an old story. Something about a knight who rode through a blizzard and found a castle made of ice, ruled by a queen who froze anyone who lied to her. Your sister asks how the knight survived. Your mother pauses and then answers, "He didn't." You all go quiet after that. The fire crackles, the walls creak, and you listen for the sound of the wind growing teeth again. The hearth has become your whole world. It's not comfort, it's strategy. Every log you burn is a decision. Every flicker of flame is borrowed time. You sit close enough that the front of your legs are warm, but the backs are still cold. You have to rotate like a pig on a spit just to avoid freezing on one side. And then there's the smoke. Oh, the smoke. It curls out of the fire in thick, greasy ropes, staining the low ceiling beams and filling your nose with the constant stench of ash and charred wood. Your eyes sting. They water so often that you can barely tell when you're actually crying. And that little chimney above the hearth? It's a hole. Just a hole. Sometimes it draws the smoke upward like it's supposed to, and sometimes it just spits it back into the room. No warning, no pattern. The whole house smells like burnt socks and boiled onions, which is better than the way it smelled last week, when a rat died in the wall behind the storage shelf. You found it eventually, stiff and mummified, its teeth bared like it had frozen mid-snarl. You buried it in the snow. A dignified ending, all things considered. When you were younger, you used to imagine castles, big stone halls with fires roaring at both ends, warm meat on long tables, furs draped over benches. Now you realise castles are cold too, probably worse. Thick stone holds the chill like a grudge. At least your house, made of sticks and mud, warms up eventually. Kind of. You shift on the bench beside the hearth. It creaks. Everything creaks in winter. The beams, your knees, the door hinge, which is wrapped in a bit of oiled cloth to keep it from freezing shut. Every noise is louder now too, like the cold sharpens the edges of sound. You turn your attention back to the fire. Feeding it is an art. You want enough heat to chase away the edge of frost, but not so much that you waste the good wood. You stack bark first, then twigs, then smaller logs. The biggest pieces, the hardwoods that really burn, you save for the middle of the night, when the dark is longest and your fear of freezing is sharpest. There's a crack from the corner, not loud but sharp enough to startle. You glance over, it's the wall shifting. The frame has warped slightly in the cold, and now there's a new gap between the post and the daub. Wind whistles. Through it like a ghost trying to whisper. You curse softly under your breath. That means another draft to patch, another thing to fix, Another hour tomorrow spent outside, hands numb, stuffing mud into cracks that won't hold. Your mother is coughing now too. Not badly. Not yet. But enough that you notice. You glance at her. She waves you off, but her eyes are glassy. You both know what happens when coughs stick around. There's no doctor, no medicine, only prayers and poultices, garlic, honey, warm stones wrapped in cloth. Sometimes it works. Sometimes people just stop waking up. The smoke thickens. Your eyes burn again. You reach up to the hole in the ceiling, your so-called chimney, and prod at the edge with a stick. A bit of soot falls, powdering your sleeve. Then, a sharp gust of wind outside reverses the draft, and suddenly the smoke is billowing back into the room. You all start coughing. Your sister shouts, waving her hands like she's trying to swat the smoke away. Your grandmother doesn't move. She's asleep or pretending to be. You scramble to open the door just enough to let the haze spill out into the frozen air. A rush of icy wind replaces it, and now your teeth are chattering again. It's always a choice in winter, smoke or cold. You rarely get both to behave. You shut the door and pray the fire will settle. It does eventually, coughing and snapping like it's alive. You sit back down, blinking tears from your eyes. The smell clings to your hair, your clothes, your skin. You'll never not smell like this again. Later you go outside and see the skies a low, aching blue. The kind of blue that feels heavier than grey. You walk behind the house to chop more kindling. Not real firewood. You're out of that. Just twigs and bits of bark. You use a hatchet that's so dull it might as well be a rock. It takes ages to split even the soft stuff, and your fingers go numb again. A few villages over, you heard a chimney caught fire. Burned the whole roof off. The family had to move into their barn. You try not to think about how your own chimney isn't lined with anything. Just rough clay and wishful thinking. Every time you start a fire, you wonder if it'll be the one that decides not to stay in the hearth. There's a story people tell in the winter, not a legend exactly, more like a warning, about the smoke wraith, a spirit that lives in hearths and climbs out when the fire's too small. It wraps around you in the night and presses into your lungs. People say it can make you forget to wake up. Your grandmother used to tell it like a fairy tale. Now she just coughs when the fire crackles too high. As the sun sinks, the hearth glows red, soft and trembling. You lay the night logs carefully. One for now, one for midnight. One for the hour just before dawn when it's coldest, and your breath feels like it might shatter in the air. You wrap yourself in every blanket, every cloak, every scrap of fabric you own. You lie, close to your sister again, her hair smelling like wood smoke and wool. You close your eyes and pretend you're not counting the hours. Pretend the draft from the new crack isn't crawling over your face like cold fingers. Just one more night. That's the lie you tell yourself. Just one more. You'll make it. You have to. Outside, the chimney continues to belch smoke into the moonlight. From a distance, it probably looks like someone's living a warm life inside. Someone with roast meat and red wine and laughter. But up close, it's just you. Eyes stinging. Stomach growling. Praying the wood lasts until morning. And listening for the wraith in the smoke. You dress in the dark again. It's not really dark, not in the way the deep forest is, but the light that leaks in through the wooden slats of your shutter is more suggestion than illumination. Enough to find your boots by feel, to tell your sleeve from your leg wrappings, but not enough to see your breath hanging in the air. You don't need to see it. You can feel it. You breathe in and your lungs sting, like the air's been steeped in knives. Layering up is a routine now, almost a ritual. First, the linen undershirt. Thin as old parchment and holey in places, but you wear it anyway because that's what you do. Then the wool tunic, dark brown and itchy, heavier with the smoke it's absorbed than with its actual weight. Breeches, patched at both knees. 2 pairs of stockings, one layered over the other, both full of thin spots. And your only belt, a strip of leather so worn it's gone soft. Then comes the outer tunic. It's thick, dyed with onion skin last summer to a faint yellowish tint that's now mostly just grey. On top of that, your wool cloak, fraying around the hem and permanently curled where it once caught fire at the hearth. It still smells a little like panic. You wrap it tightly, fastening it with a wooden toggle you carved yourself, not because you're clever, but because your old one snapped in half during a hard frost. Last come the boots, barely deserving of the name. They're leather, yes, but cracked and soft. You've packed them with straw for warmth, but it never stays dry for long. Every step is a cold squish. The leather's so stiff from wet and dry cycles it creaks when you walk. They're more like hollowed out hooves than proper footwear. You don't look like a warrior. You don't look like a noble. You look like what you are. Someone trying not to die in winter. Everyone looks like that now. Even the village reeve, who usually carries himself with that smug stiffness, wears a knitted cap with one ear flap missing and gloves that are clearly his wife's. The blacksmith's daughter goes around wrapped in what looks like 3 tablecloths sewn together. No one judges. You could wrap yourself in hay and people would nod approvingly. Warm is smart. Warm is rare. You step outside and feel that slap of wind again, the kind that immediately finds the gap between your collar and your neck and just lives there. The snow crunches under your boots, loud and brittle. Overnight it refroze into that hard, squeaky crust that doesn't give under your weight until you've already trusted it. You slip twice on the way to the well, catch yourself once. The other time you land hard on your elbow and now your arm's throbbing. There's a deep, unspoken etiquette in winter. No one laughs when someone falls. No one points. No one teases, because they know it could be them next. One bad fall on the ice, one broken leg, and that's it. You're not walking to the woods for firewood anymore. You're not hauling water. You're not surviving. The snow becomes your bed, your blanket, your coffin. You finally get to the well and find the bucket frozen in the ice ring around the lip. You swear softly, blow on your hands, and try to chip at it with your belt buckle. Eventually it gives. You haul up the rope, knuckles scraped raw, and fill the pail. The water sloshes like liquid stone. It'll freeze again before you finish using it, but you don't have time to be precious. You carry it back, cradling it like a child, careful not to spill even a drop. Back inside, the hearth's already awake. Your sister got up early to coax the flame back to life. She's hunched beside it now, hands cupped near the embers. You give her a nod, silent approval, winter style, and pour a little water into the iron pot hanging over the flame. A handful of oats go in, and not much else. You stir it with a wooden spoon that's slowly wearing itself into a point. You all eat without speaking. The porridge is gluey and grey. You chew each bite like it owes you something. But it's hot, and that makes it precious. Afterward you lick the spoon because nothing gets wasted, ever. Not in winter. Your grandmother is bundled in a corner, eyes open but distant. She hasn't moved much this week. You offered her broth yesterday, but she only took a few sips. You can't tell if she's slipping or just tired. Or maybe she's given up a little. Winter has a way of wearing people down into silence. Sometimes it feels like it's feeding on your will more than your warmth. After breakfast, you head out to the barn, if you can call it that. It's more like a lean-to with ambitions. The wind cuts through it like it owns the place. Inside, the animals are clustered together. The goat eyes you with disdain, as always. The chickens look half frozen. You lost 2 already this month, and the rest are barely laying. You scatter what little feed you have left, mostly husks and crushed bits of barley, and mutter something that might be a prayer. The pig is better off. Round, lazy, and still warm under his bristles, but he's food. Not now, but soon. Maybe January, maybe February when the stores run low. You try not to think about it, but you know how many meals are hidden in his belly. How many days of fat and warmth and bone, broth. You scratch behind his ear and feel a quiet guilt bloom in your chest. You've got errands today. The cooper has a pile of broken barrel staves you might be able to take for firewood. You head across the village, snow crunching, cloak flapping. Everything is grey and white. The sky, the ground, the buildings, even the people. Like winter has washed the colour out of the world and only left outlines. As you walk, you pass other villagers bundled in whatever they've got. A man with hay stuffed into the lining of his coat. A child with rags tied around their face like a mask. Everyone looks like a parody of a person, like the cold has turned them into scarecrows pretending to be human. You remember that the historians say the medieval world was full of colour, bright reds, vivid blues, patterned cloth. But in winter chews that up and spits it out. Your world is beige, brown, grey and white, and quiet. So quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your ears ring, like the snow is smothering sound itself. At the cooper's shop, you help stack wood for a few minutes, and he tosses you 3 staves, splintered but dry. You thank him. He nods. No words exchanged. Just 2 people trying to make it to spring without dying. As you head back home, the wind picks up again. It always does. It waits until your hands are full, until your hood slips back a little, and then it pounces. You hunch your shoulders, grit your teeth and press forward. You're tired, cold, hungry. Everything aches, but you're still walking. And right now, in the dead heart of winter, that counts as winning. The stew doesn't taste like meat, but technically it contains some. A scrap of smoked pork, more fat than flesh, and a sliver of bone no bigger than your thumb, has been simmering with turnip greens and barley since the morning. It's not delicious. It's not even satisfying, but it's warm and greasy and coats your insides like armour. Winter food doesn't have to taste good. It has to stick to your ribs. You eat slowly, half chewing, half imagining flavours that aren't there. Maybe you can remember what real meat used to taste like, when your uncle visited last year and brought a sausage wrapped in cloth. You and your sister split it like royalty. She cried while eating her half, though she swore it was just the smoke from the fire. You didn't argue. Now you measure meat in splinters. Every bit you have was either dried, salted, smoked, or soaked in vinegar back in the autumn. Anything fresh is long gone. Eaten, spoiled, or stolen by mice. You've never been more aware of mice in your life. You hear them at night, chewing under the floor or sneaking into the food chest. Once you caught one and tried to kill it for soup, but you couldn't bring yourself to do it. Your sister named it. You let it go. Most days you eat grains, barley, rye, lentils. Not bread. Not unless you're lucky. Bread means flour, and flour means grinding grain. And your family's hand mill is cracked down one side. You'd have to carry your grain to the village mill and pay the miller with something more than good intentions. Sometimes, if the snow isn't too deep, you do just that. But more often, you just soak the grain and boil it into mush. It's filling at least, even if it's the texture of wet sand. Occasionally you have beans, though they take forever to cook and burn easily if the fire dies halfway. And you always keep onions. They last forever. They smell like someone cried into vinegar, but they're medicine, flavour and filler all in one. Right now you're down to 2, both starting to sprout. You think of them as old friends. You've already named them too. You once had dried apples, sharp and sweet, even months later. But those disappeared weeks ago. You gave your last slice to your grandmother when she stopped speaking for 2 days straight. She chewed it slowly, then patted your hand. It's the only thing she's tasted since. Salt is more precious than gold. Real gold, not the shiny fake kind from church paintings. Salt preserves everything, seasons everything, disguises rot. You used to have a lump of it the size of a child's fist. Now you have a bit stored in waxed cloth, and you tap out a few grains at a time like a miser tipping a bribe. It's grey and gritty and came from a market 3 villages away. Spoilage is a constant threat. Even in this cold rot finds a way. You open the wrong sack and sometimes you get that nose-stinging reek of mildew or worse. That means a ruined meal, and in winter, a ruined meal feels personal, like you've been betrayed by time itself. You try not to show your sister when something's gone bad. She's too young to fake gratitude convincingly. You remember a time, long ago, maybe you were 5, when a deer wandered into the village and was brought down by 3 men with spears. The feast lasted 2 days. Every part was eaten, even the eyes, especially the eyes. You remember chewing on a bit of gristle and feeling like a lord. You wish you'd savoured it more. Sometimes you help your mother make broth. You take bones, long since picked clean, and boil them again and again. You add in bark if you're desperate, mushrooms if you're lucky. Mostly it becomes a sort of grey soup that tastes faintly of hope. You drink it slowly as if pretending it's richer makes it so. Your dreams have changed. You used to dream of summer. Now you dream of food. Not just meat, but butter, cheese, hot bread with golden crusts, fat sizzling in a pan, a boiled egg, a whole egg, warm in your hand with the shell still steaming. You wake up salivating. Your stomach growls so loudly some nights it wakes the others. A family 2 houses down ate their dog last week. They didn't announce it, but everyone knows. One day the dog was barking at shadows. The next, the air smelled like cooked sinew, and their children had fuller cheeks. No one blames them. You just wonder how bad it'll have to get before you make that kind of decision. You think about meat differently now. It's not just food, it's heat. It's calories you can feel moving through your veins. After you eat anything fatty, your fingers tingle. Your thoughts get clearer. Your heart slows down. You remember that warmth isn't just external. It can come from inside, too. There's an old superstition your grandmother used to whisper back before the coughing started. Never eat the meat of something that looked you in the eye. It was supposed to be about guilt. But these days, you think maybe it's about survival. Because if you care too much, if you remember too much, the food won't go down. And if it doesn't go down, neither do you. Sometimes the church gives alms, not often. The stores are low there too, but once a week, you line up like everyone else, bowl in hand, and hope the pot hasn't run dry. They dole out fish heads, split beans, thick slabs of bread crust soaked in milk. Last week, you got something that might have been pigeon. You didn't ask questions, you just said thank you. There's a man in the village, Old Walter, who claims he can tell whether a piece of meat is good or spoiled just by listening to it. He says the rot hums at a certain pitch when you hold it near your ear. People laugh at him in warmer months. Not now. Now you see folks pressing their heads to a side of ham, eyes closed like monks at prayer. You don't eat until you're full. That's not a feeling you remember. You eat until you stop shaking, until you stop snapping at your sister, until you can think in full sentences again. Then you stop. Always leave something for tomorrow. That's the rule. Even if something is just broth with the memory of a bone. You fall asleep with hunger knotted in your belly like a sleeping cat, warm but restless. You dream of butter melting on a wooden spoon, of fat sizzling in a pan, and you wake up already chewing on nothing. Because meat in winter is not just food, it's currency, it's medicine, it's forgiveness. And for most people, it's already gone. You can always tell when someone's food preservation went wrong. It starts with a smell. Not sharp, like rot, but heavy. Sweet in the wrong way. Sickly, like meat that remembered it used to be alive and is now offended by your attempts to keep it from returning to dust. You've opened a storage pot like that before. The stench hit you like a slap. You gagged, dropped the lid, and stepped back so hard you kicked over the water bucket. That dinner turned into boiled oats again. No salt. Preserving food for winter isn't some casual kitchen task. It's a ritual, a gamble, and a desperate prayer rolled into one. You did it all back in late autumn. Pickled onions, smoked trout, salted pork belly, dried apples strung like beads across the rafters. Everything you could spare, stuffed into crocks or tied in cloth sacks and hidden in the coldest corners of your home. You still remember the flurry of those weeks, hauling in bundles, drying herbs, slicing and salting until your hands were puckered and raw. But salt's expensive, and you never had enough. Vinegar's better, but it only goes so far. Smoking helps, but it depends on the weather and the wood and how closely you watch the fire. One misstep, too much moisture, a forgotten jar, a pot with a cracked seal, and you're stuck with a mushy mass of what used to be survival food. You poke at the latest suspect. A tied-up cloth bundle of dried mushrooms hanging near the smoke-dark rafter. They're shriveled, but still pliant. No visible mould. You pinch one, sniff it. It smells earthy, strong. Your stomach reacts before your brain does. You cut a few down, toss them into the pot with a bit of barley and a shard of last week's carrot. It's not luxurious, but it'll do. Some people say the key is root vegetables. Beets, turnips, parsnips, anything that grows underground, stubborn and thick-skinned. You have a small pit dug into the ground outside, covered with straw and boards. It's where you store the last of your potatoes, the few that didn't sprout or rot in the first month. You check them once a week, brushing snow aside, your hands numbing instantly. The good ones get brought in. The bad ones, you toss them to the pigs if you can spare them. Sometimes you just bury them deeper and pretend you didn't see the mould. There's a bitter truth you've learned. No food ages gracefully. Everything either dries out or sours. Dried herbs lose their taste. Pickled vegetables go soft and weepy. You stir the pot one day and a greenish blob rises to the top, quivering like it wants to apologise. But you eat it anyway. Not with joy, just resolve. Sometimes food tricks you. That's the worst part. You open a sealed pot and everything looks fine. Bright, firm, still smelling like autumn. You warm it over the fire, serve it to your sister, feel a flicker of pride. And then the vomiting starts. Fast and violent. The way she shakes afterward. The way your mother's face goes blank, calculating how long she can last without real food while her daughter recovers. The guilt eats more than hunger ever could. You've heard stories of people eating spoiled meat on purpose. The butcher's apprentice said some soldiers in the last war used to keep it until it was practically crawling, because they believed the rot made them stronger, madder, immune to pain. You think that's nonsense, but when your stomach has been empty for too long, you start wondering how much you could endure. You scrape off the mould, cut around the black spots, boil it twice, swear it smells fine. Maybe it does. Maybe your senses are lying to you. The village healer, Marit, who smells like garlic and peat, swears by burying food in snow. She keeps her jars of goose fat and pickled eggs beneath a drift behind her cottage. Says the earth does a better job than stone. She once showed you a goosefoot wrapped in cloth, perfectly preserved after a month underground. You didn't ask why she saved it. You don't ask a lot of things these days. Today, you venture into the pantry alcove, a grand term for a couple shelves carved into the wall beside the fire. It's where you keep your food stores, protected by whatever you can find. Old sacks, broken lids, and your faith. You count everything again for the third time this week. 5 potatoes, 1 large, a lump of lard, the size of a clenched fist, 2 onions, still firm, a pouch of dried peas, a half round of sour cheese so hard it could double as a weapon. A miracle, really. You turn the cheese in your hands, run your thumb along the rind. It smells like sharp hope. You almost weep at the idea of grating it into your next stew. You don't, though. You wrap it tightly and put it back. It's not for today. It's for the day you can't take another bowl of grey mush without going mad. And then, tucked in the farthest corner, you find it. A piece of smoked eel. Dry, slightly oily, wrapped in cloth you didn't recognise at first. You'd forgotten it entirely. You hold it like it's a lost treasure, pulse quickening. You could eat it now, a feast, a warm belly for once. But no, you set it aside. Save it for your grandmother, for her next good day, if it ever comes. Preservation is more than food. It's hope. It's clinging to something that says, you will make it to the next season. It's a game of math and memory and frost, of jars sealed too tight or not tight enough, of mould that creeps like a thief, of potatoes that grow eyes and start plotting escape. It's work that doesn't end. After the evening meal, you inspect the storage again, rotate sacks, check seals. You do it with your nose, your fingers, your instincts. There's no thermometer, no refrigerator, no calendar telling you how long it's been. Only your fear, and your memory of how your cousin died 2 winters ago, after eating soup made from a turnip that smelled a little off. People say you can survive the cold, survive the dark, survive the sickness. But if you can't survive the food, none of it matters. The cold won't kill you if hunger gets there first. So you wrap the eel back up, stash it behind the oat jar, say nothing to your sister who would eat it in a heartbeat, who would deserve to, but you're saving it anyway, because winter demands small sacrifices, and your secret eel might just be one of them. You hear it before you see it, the sound of something struggling, wheezing in a low rhythmic grunt. Out in the barn, the cow is down. She's not dead yet, but she's close. You can tell by the way she moves, her limbs kicking gently at nothing, like she's dreaming of better pastures. There's frost on her eyelashes, and her breath comes out in shallow bursts that hang in the air like ghosts. Your mother's already there, kneeling beside the beast with a hand on its flank. She doesn't say anything. She just looks at you, her eyes hollowed out by too many bad nights and not enough warmth. You know what she's thinking. You're thinking it too. She won't make it. The cow, not your mother, though these days that line gets blurrier. The cow's ribs are sharp under her hide, and there's no strength left in her limbs. You tried to keep her going, fed her the last of the turnip tops, let her sleep wrapped in old sacks. But a cow can't survive on good intentions and watery gruel. She needed hay, and you didn't have enough. Needed shelter, and all you had was a drafty lean-to that the wind constantly tried to peel apart. The cow's name is Brindle. You named her when she was born. one summer that feels like a lifetime ago. She used to run crooked circles in the paddock, kicking her heels and mooing loud enough to wake the entire village. Now she can't even lift her head. You kneel beside her, resting your hand where her hide is still warm. You whisper something soft. A thanks, maybe. An apology. And then your mother gets the knife. You don't ask. You just stand. You go back into the house. You stir the fire. You sharpen the other blades. Not the fancy carving knife, that's long gone. Just the boning blade, the old cleaver with a cracked handle, and your father's skinning knife that somehow never rusts, even after all these years. You wrap them in cloth, tuck them under your cloak and return to the barn. The snow crunches under your boots like dry bones. You try not to think too hard. You try not to look at her eyes. But when it's over, the silence feels like a wound. Your sister sits on a stool by the hearth, small hands clenched in her lap. She knows. Everyone knows. You won't be milking Brindle anymore, but you'll be eating her. This is what winter does. It makes you count your animals in meals, not moments. That cow's 3 weeks of meat if you're careful. Steaks at first, then stews, then bone broth until the marrow runs clear. You'll tan her hide in the snow, cut it into strips for patching boots, maybe fashion a new belt. Nothing is wasted, not in winter. You hang the meat in the shed, rubbing the cuts with the last of your salt. You leave the organs for today's stew, still warm and soft. The liver, especially. You cube it, brown it over the fire in a bit of lard, and add it to a pot already bubbling with barley and garlic. The smell fills the house like smoke and memories. Your sister sniffs the air like a starving dog. She doesn't ask where it came from. She just eats. You all do. No one speaks. The silence is a kind of respect. Later, you climb up into the loft where you keep the smoked meat. The older stuff is shrinking, curling in on itself. You check the hooks. No maggots, no mould. That's something. You add today's cuts, hang them beside the rest. It's not warm up here, but it's dry, and the wind keeps most of the rats away. You hope. There's a quiet debate. In your mind, the same one everyone has this time of year. Is it better to slaughter early and stretch the food longer, or wait and risk losing the animal to the cold? It's not just about meat. A cow means milk, and milk means cheese, and cheese lasts. But a dead cow that dies from cold gives you less meat, and sometimes spoils before you can butcher it, so you weigh it every day. This one made the decision for you. Other families are making the same calls. You've already seen 2 goats disappear from behind the neighbour's fence. The miller's old sow vanished overnight, and old Jan, the baker, hasn't been seen at the oven in days. He had chickens. Not many, but enough to make noise. It's been suspiciously quiet on his street. You're expected to share some of the meat with the Lord Steward. Taxes, even now. 1 hindquarter and a portion of the fat. You'll wrap it in cloth and take it up to the manor. You'll smile and bow, and maybe they'll give you a few onions or some flour in return. Maybe they won't. The exchange rate between hunger and power is never in your favour. Back home, you help your mother strip the last of the fat from the ribs. She's not crying. Not exactly. Her eyes are red, and her nose is running, but no sound comes out. She just works. You recognise that look. It's the same one you wore when you found your father frozen in the woods 2 winters ago, axe still in hand. Later that evening, your sister sits by the hearth, mouth greasy, stomach full for the first time in days. She falls asleep with a smile on her face. You want to share it, but all you can feel is the draft crawling under the door and the sound of meat sizzling in your memory. There's something else too, something you try to ignore, a story you heard once. That eating your own livestock too early in the season is a curse, that you'll dream of them every night until spring, lowing outside your window, standing in the snow, asking why you didn't try harder. You stare into the fire. The fat from Brindle's liver is popping in the coals. It smells like survival. It smells like guilt. It smells like home. You take a bite of the stew and chew slowly. You close your eyes. You don't hear any ghosts. Not yet. The days are short now, laughably short. You blink and it's dusk. The sun comes up late and leaves early, like it owes the sky money. Morning light barely spills across the village before it's already thinking about retreating again. By mid-afternoon, the shadows stretch long and slow across the snow, like fingers trying to pull the day underground. You find yourself glancing at the sky often, not to admire it. There's nothing to admire. but just to estimate how much time you have before everything turns black again. The grey has weight. You never knew that was possible, but it presses on you like a wet wool blanket draped across your chest. Nothing's bright. The snow isn't sparkling, the air isn't crisp. It's just dull and cold and endless. Even the white looks dirty, grubby with soot from the hearth, muddy where boots have tracked across it, yellowed in spots where animals relieve themselves in the open. It's not winter like in the old tales. It's a smudged, unwashed version, a copy of a copy. You try to keep busy, everyone does. But the truth is there's not much to do once winter locks you in its jaws. The fields are frozen, useless. The garden's buried under snow. There's no mending left to do. Your clothes are already patched into quilts with sleeves. No one builds anything in this cold. Wood won't behave. Metal cracks. Fingers go numb too fast. The village is quiet in a way that feels unnatural. You can hear doors creak open and slam shut from across the square. A sneeze from one house echoes down 3 streets. Children don't scream anymore. They sit by the fire or sleep, or just stare at the wall, their playfulness buried somewhere under layers of wool and boredom. Even the dogs move slower now, their ribs showing more each week. Time gets strange in winter. Hours blend into each other like soup without seasoning. You can't tell Monday from Friday. You only count days in terms of how much food is left or who hasn't come outside yet. Someone mentions that it's nearly a holy day, and you realise you've completely lost track. You haven't been to church in over a week, not because you've turned your back on God, but because walking across the ice just isn't worth it if you can't feel your feet by the time you arrive. Inside, the house feels smaller every day. The same 4 walls, the same bench, the same fire, and the same faces. You love your family, you do. But the cabin fever sets in anyway. Your sister hums too loud. Your mother sighs too often. You catch yourself gritting your teeth at the sound of someone stirring the pot wrong. Then you feel guilty about it. But the guilt doesn't make the tension go away. It just adds another layer. Some days you try to read. You only have a single book. Well, a psalter, technically. And your grandmother's hands are too stiff now to turn the pages. So you read aloud when you can. You don't understand all of it, but the rhythm is comforting. The words have weight. Even if they don't make sense, they feel like structure. Like time hasn't forgotten you completely. Then there are the bad days. The ones where even the fire feels cold. When the draft through the wall somehow finds its way under your clothes, across your chest, into your lungs. When every breath burns and the idea of standing up just to stoke the fire feels like trying to climb a mountain. Those are the days when silence becomes something dangerous. When your mind starts to chew on itself. Your mother knits when she has the energy. Not with real yarn, that ran out a long time ago, but with strips of fabric cut from old shirts. She's making a scarf that looks like it's weeping, but she does it. Anyway, and you don't stop her. It keeps her hands moving. Keeps her from staring out the window and counting who didn't make it through last week. One night, the darkness comes early, and you don't bother lighting the tallow candle. You can't spare the wick. Instead, you sit by the hearth and watch the fire settle into a dull red glow. Your sister is already asleep, curled like a cat beneath a blanket that smells like goats and ash. Your mother hums softly under her breath, the same tune every night. You think it's a hymn, but the words are gone. You close your eyes, and for a second, you imagine what the world would look like if the sun just didn't come back, if this dim twilight became permanent. A long, grey pause that stretched out forever. You shake the thought away, but it lingers. The next day, you make yourself go outside, just for a while, just to remind yourself the world still exists. The air hits you like a slap, sharp and biting, with a wind that flays your cheeks raw. But the cold is honest. It wakes you up in a way nothing inside the house can anymore. You walk to the edge of the woods and back. You don't stay long. The snow is too deep and the trees look haunted. But you breathe the air, stretch your legs, and return with a handful of kindling and a little more patience than you left with. When you walk in the door again, your sister wraps her arms around your waist and asks if the sun's any warmer yet. You lie and say yes. The next morning is darker than usual. Heavy clouds like wet wool stuffed into the sky. You wait for the light that never really arrives. The whole day feels like dusk. You eat barley mush for the 3rd meal in a row and no one complains. It's hot and that's enough. evening creeps in like a thief. You light the hearth again, sit close to it, and watch the fire devour the last of the dry twigs you gathered. The warmth spreads, shallow and thin, but you stretch your feet toward it anyway. You ask your mother if she remembers what summer felt like. She doesn't answer. She just stares into the fire and pulls the scarf around her shoulders. You get the feeling she's not just thinking about summer. She's thinking about all the winters that came before. In the distance a bell rings, faint and cold. Someone has died, probably. Or maybe they just want prayers. Maybe they want company. Or maybe it's just a ritual, a way to push back against the creeping dark. You sit there, watching the fire, listening to the wind, and counting the hours until the light returns, and hoping deep down that it actually does. You wake to silence, not peace, just the eerie hush of a world that's frozen solid. No wind, no birds, no distant bells. Even the trees have gone quiet, their limbs locked stiff by the cold. The hearth is nothing but ash, faintly warm if you dig into the middle. Your breath forms long clouds in the air, thick enough to obscure your sister's sleeping face across the room. You watch it curl upward and disappear like a prayer no one's listening to. There's no work today, not the kind that earns you coin anyway. The frost has claimed every tool left outside, frozen the well rope solid, and turned the paths into polished glass. Your boots won't grip anything, and neither will your fingers. So you stay inside for a while, wrapped in your cloak, pretending you're resting. But rest isn't restful in winter. It's just waiting without warmth. And in the back of your mind, the real worry grows. There's no income now. Not for your family. Not for most. You're a peasant. A commoner. Your survival depends on work. On the fields, the forests, the labour that the land lets you trade for food and shelter. But in winter, the land turns its back. It folds its arms and says, "Come back later." Until then, you beg. Or you barter. Or you go hungry. You used to collect firewood for the manor in exchange for bread and fish scraps. But the manor's ovens haven't been baking lately, and the steward said they're tight on stores, which means you get nothing, even if you break your backhauling kindling. You can't work the fields, you can't mend thatch, and nobody's hiring a shepherd in December. So your mother has been trading. Quietly, discreetly. You noticed last week when your only copper cooking pot went missing, and 2 days later, you had a fresh loaf of bread and a small slab of butter on the table. She wouldn't say what she gave up, she still won't. But she's thinner now, her wedding ring is gone, and the pouch she keeps under her cloak hangs a little lighter. You decide to make your own trade today. You take the bundle of dried herbs you've been saving, the mint and yarrow from last summer, dried and tied with string, and walk to Merritt's cottage. She's the village healer and midwife, and always short on supplies. The snow crunches beneath your feet like snapping bones, and the wind stings your cheeks until they burn. You keep your head down and your steps quick. When you reach Merritt's, she answers the door wrapped in 4 shawls and smelling like vinegar and smoke. She eyes your offering, sniffs the mint and nods. In return, she gives you a small cloth pouch of dried elderberries and a lump of beeswax. Not exactly a feast, but better than nothing. Elderberries can be steeped into a drink that helps with fever. The wax you can burn if the hearth goes out. You thank her and turn to leave, but she pauses you. "Tell your mother I'll take stitching work," she says. "Anything fine. I've got cloth and no hands to use it." You nod. Noted. She doesn't ask for coin. No one does anymore. Coin is a summer thing. In winter, it's all trade, favours and silence. Back home, your sister is trying to repair her mittens with a bit of twine and a bone needle. Her fingers are red and cracked, but she keeps going. She smiles at you when you walk in, like everything's fine. You pretend it is. You offer your mother the elderberries and the wax, and she raises an eyebrow but says nothing. She's not the kind to praise small victories. Still, she adds the berries to the pouch of healing supplies hanging near the hearth, and the wax goes into the emergency stash, next to the last bit of tallow and the broken candle stub. After that, the day drags. There's no schedule, no bell to mark the hours, just the slow shifting of a light from grey to darker grey. You scrape ice from the doorframe. You patch a crack in the wall with frozen moss and cloth. You sweep ash from the hearth. You break some branches in the yard with a mallet because they won't split any other way. You pretend you're being useful. There's no real labour anymore, not the kind that gives you purpose. You can't make plans for spring. You can't plant, can't build, can't improve. You can only hold the line. That's what winter is. Endurance. Not glory. Not growth. Just refusing to fall one more day. And then there's the pride. Pride in work used to be a thing, even in your life. You remember the satisfaction of harvesting wheat, carrying buckets, fixing the fence that kept the goat from eating the neighbour's cabbages. But now pride feels like a luxury. When you're scrubbing mildew off the wall with your sleeve or chewing bread so hard your jaw cramps, it's hard to feel noble. There are people who don't make it. Not just physically, mentally. You've seen it before. A neighbour who used to be lively and chatty suddenly stops coming outside, stops answering the door. Weeks later, someone finds them curled in bed, too weak to move or too numb to care. People say it's the cold that killed them, but you know better. The cold just finishes the job. It's the days without work, without motion, without hope that do the most damage. You try to stay sharp, not just your body, but your thoughts. You run lists in your mind, what food is left, what tools need repair, what favours you still owe and can still collect. It gives the day shape, gives your brain something to hold on to so it doesn't slip into that same stillness you've seen claim others. You think about the tanner's boy who vanished last year after the snow piled up to the roof. No one found him. No one really looked. Some say he fell into the river trying to reach the monastery. Others think he just walked into the woods and never came back. Either way, he was one of the first to say, "I'm going mad in this house," and no one listened until it was too late. When the sky starts to dim, again, you light a piece of wax and stir the pot for the evening meal. Your mother is darning socks. Your sister is sleeping on the floor. You watch the flame flicker and count the days left in your head. 40 more? 50? No one really knows. Not until the thaw. But you'll be here. Still patching walls. Still walking to trade. Still waiting for the work to come back. Because when you're poor in winter, doing nothing isn't rest. It's a slow kind of death. And you're not done yet. It starts with a cough. A dry one. Nothing dramatic. Nothing you'd remember if it happened in summer. But it doesn't stop. It comes again that night, and again the next morning, this time sounding deeper, rougher. Then your sister coughs too. And now the inside of your home, already too small, too cold, too stale, begins to feel like a box where breath moves in circles, carrying sickness from one mouth to the next. Your grandmother is the first to get truly ill. She's been weak for weeks, ever since Brindle went down, but now it's something else entirely. A rattling in her chest like her lungs are full of pebbles. She tries to sit up to sip some broth, but the shaking is too much. You hold the bowl while your mother feeds her by hand. She takes in 2 spoonfuls before falling asleep mid-chew. You call it sleep, but it looks like something closer to fading. Sickness spreads quickly in winter. There's nowhere to hide. Every breath shared. Every blanket passed around. The fire makes the air heavy and damp, perfect for disease to crawl in and build a home in your lungs. You crack the door for a few minutes to let the air change, but it lets in more cold than relief. Your mother yells when she sees, even though her voice is hoarse. Better a fever than frostbite, she growls, which might be true, might not be. Either way, the door stays shut. A few neighbours are sick too. You hear it through the walls, deep coughing, gut-wrenching retches. Someone down the road passed in the night, they say. The Thatcher's boy. He was only 10. The priest came by with a wooden cart and a covered sheet. Didn't even ring the bell, didn't want to spook the village. The thing is, there's nothing you can do, no medicine, no doctor. Just hot water, prayers, and whatever herbs you dried last summer. You boil elderberries with mint and pour the thick, dark brew into cracked mugs. It tastes like dirt and iron, but your grandmother drinks it when she's awake. She mumbles about angels sometimes, about her sister who died in the last famine. You pretend not to hear. You stir the pot and keep your mouth shut. Your sister isn't looking great either. Her face is pale and her lips are dry. She sleeps all day now, wrapped in a cloak too big for her. She still breathes through her nose, which you take as a good sign, but when you press your hand to her forehead, she's hot like a stone left too close to the fire. Your mother doesn't rest. She doesn't even sit down anymore. She moves like she's fighting the house itself, stirring, cleaning, checking on everyone, tying herbs into bundles to hang by the door as if thyme and yarrow can scare away death. You try to help, but you're exhausted too. You haven't slept more than an hour at a time in days. Every cough wakes you. Every strange silence terrifies you. The priest stops by once. bundled in a cloak so thick he looks like a mound of wool with eyes. He stands in the doorway, won't come inside, says a few words, leaves a small vial of holy water and a scrap of cloth blessed by a saint you've never heard of. You say thank you and tuck it into the wall by the hearth. It can't hurt. There's a superstition going around this year. That winter coughs aren't just illness, they're punishment. That when the cold comes early, it carries the souls of those who died badly the year before. Those who were unburied or forgotten. They whisper through the chimneys and settle into your chest, making it harder to breathe, harder to wake. You don't believe it. But when your grandmother starts whispering in her sleep, you wonder. Food becomes strange when someone's sick. You still cook it, still eat it, but with less enthusiasm. Guilt clings to every bite. Your grandmother can't eat. Your sister won't. You start rationing your own food without meaning to, just out of some quiet respect, or superstition, or fear that you're next. One night the fire dies while you're asleep. You wake up coughing hard, lungs tight like a bellows jammed with ash. The air is freezing. Your sister is shivering beside you, skin cold and wet with sweat. You scramble to relight the hearth with trembling hands. The coals are still alive, just barely. You blow on them, coaxing them back with bits of bark and a prayer mumbled under your breath. It catches. Light fills the room again. You sit there, arms around your knees, watching the flames claw their way back to life. You don't cry, but something in you feels hollowed out, like winter has dug a little deeper into your chest than before. The next morning your grandmother doesn't wake up, she's not cold yet, but she's still, so still. Your mother sits beside her for an hour, maybe 2, holding her hand. She doesn't say anything, doesn't cry, just stares at the old woman who taught her to spin wool and stir broth, and count the stars to predict the weather. You and your mother wrap her in linens and carry her outside. The ground is too hard to dig, so you place her in the deadwood shed beside the barn where the bodies go until spring. She'll be buried properly when the thaw comes, when the earth softens and the priest is well enough to swing a shovel. You don't say goodbye, not properly. Just place a candle near her feet and whisper thanks into the still air. She survived so many winters, so many, but not this one. That night, your sister's fever breaks. You find her sitting up, sweating, asking for water. She drinks 3 mugs in a row and falls asleep again, deeper this time, breathing easier. It's not victory, but it's something. The fire crackles beside you. The warmth seems to hold a little longer than usual. Your mother finally sleeps, curled in a chair, mouth open like she used to when she was younger. You tuck a blanket around her and watch the snow outside begin to fall again, silent, soft, endless. Winter is cruel, and sickness is its favourite weapon. Not quick like wolves or frostbite, but slow and gnawing. It rots from the inside. It takes your strength and your hope and your breath. But not you. Not yet. The gash on your forearm doesn't look like much at first. Just a scrape, really. Thin, shallow, red with dirt. You barely notice it when it happens. You were splitting frozen wood out near the shed, blades slippery with frost, and the hatchet glanced off the log and skimmed your skin. You winced, swore, tied a bit of cloth around it, and went on with your day. That's what you always do. No time to fuss over something that doesn't even bleed much. But winter doesn't let small things stay small. 2 days later, it's swollen and hot to the touch. Your sleeve sticks to it. The red spread halfway down to your wrist, and the skin's tight and glossy, like a blister stretched to its limits. It itches and throbs at the same time, pulsing like a drumbeat under your skin. You catch yourself scratching at it without meaning to. The pain wakes you at night, sharp and pulsing, and your hand is starting to curl funny when you try to make a fist. You don't tell your mother at first. You don't want her to worry. Not with your sister still pale and sleeping more than she should. Not after the silence that followed your grandmother's last breath. But the look on your face must give something away. She sees you pull your arm back when she goes to touch it. The next morning she asks you to show her. She peels back the cloth slowly. You see her flinch before she can hide it. She doesn't say anything, just ties it back up and tells you to keep it clean. Boil some water, she says. We'll wash it with salt. But you don't have salt to waste, not anymore. You pretend to follow her orders anyway. Marit the healer comes that afternoon. Someone must have sent word. She's wrapped in layers and smells like camphor and stale ale. She squats beside you by the fire, eyes the wound, and lets out a low hiss through her teeth. She doesn't sugarcoat it. "This is going to go bad if we don't get the poison out," she says. "Worse than bad. You'll lose the arm, or more." She digs around in her pouch and pulls out a knife, a curved bit of bone, and a wad of linen soaked in something that smells like a battlefield. You start to panic. Not openly, but inside. Everything starts shaking. You try to smile, make a joke, something about preferring to lose a toe instead, but no one laughs. Your mother brings a bottle from under the bed. Weak spirits, mostly water, but still strong enough to numb the edge. You drink fast. It burns on the way down. Then Marit cuts. You don't scream. Not exactly. But your teeth clamp down so hard you taste blood. The blade bites through swollen skin like slicing into wet fruit, and the pus that comes out is yellow-grey and smells like rot. You gag. Marit works fast, pressing and scraping, letting it drain. Then she packs it with crushed garlic and something sticky, pine resin maybe, and wraps it tight. She tells you not to touch it, not to unwrap it, not to get it wet. You nod, barely able to keep your eyes open. After she leaves, your mother sits beside you with a wet cloth. She dabs at your face, makes you drink more of the spirits, hums the same wordless tune she always does when she's too tired to speak. You fall asleep with your head against her shoulder, like you haven't done since you were too small to pretend to be tough. The next day, the fever sets in. You shiver even though the fire's high and hot. You sweat through your shirt. You dream about wolves chewing your arm, about the fire catching your sleeve, about people pointing at you and whispering, "Too slow, too sick, too late." You wake up gasping and can't tell whether it was real or not. Your sister brings you broth, thin stuff, but warm. You sip it without tasting. Your arm pulses like it's got its own heartbeat now, but the swelling goes down a little. The red doesn't spread. You consider that a win. A narrow one. There's a debate in the village, always is, about whether wounds fester more in winter because of the cold or because of the spirits. Some say the frost keeps the bad humours trapped in your blood. Others say it's punishment for sins, bad thoughts that leak into the body through cracks in your soul. You don't buy any of it. But when the pain flares again, when you can feel the heat under your skin like something growing in you, you start to wonder if there's something crawling just beneath the surface. Not fever, not infection, just something wrong. You watch the other men in the village, those who still go out, chopping ice, repairing sleds, hauling meat to the manor. You see how careful they are with their hands. Gloves made from fur scraps tightly bound, every blade cleaned after use. No one gets lazy in winter. They know what even a splinter can become when warmth is scarce, and rot moves faster than prayers. You remember a man once, Arnulf, the smith's uncle, who got a cut on his leg during harvest. Small thing. But he didn't take care of it. By the time snow fell, he couldn't walk. By midwinter, they'd taken his leg off at the knee, and he still didn't survive the thaw. You remember how grey his skin looked, how quiet his wife became afterward. You don't want to end up like Arnulf. So every day, you unwrap the bandage, clean the wound with boiled water, reapply the garlic paste. You bite your lip until it bleeds just to keep from flinching. Your mother helps when she can, though her hands shake now. Not from cold, just fatigue. Her own body running low on reserves. The worst part isn't the pain, it's the helplessness. You can't chop wood, can't carry water, can't even hold a pot without your fingers seizing up. Every hour feels stolen, every movement borrowed, but little by little, the swelling goes down, the skin starts to close, the colour fades from red to pink to that weird shiny new skin look. You're not out of the woods, not yet, but your arm is still yours. Winter doesn't like giving things back. When it takes, it usually keeps. So when you keep something, your strength, your limbs, your life, you feel it like a small act of rebellion. Like you just cheated the season, if only for now. And cheating winter, even once, feels like the greatest victory in the world. You hear the bells before you see the priest, slow, heavy, one dull clang after another. It's not a cheerful sound, not even close. It's the kind of bell you feel in your ribs, a reminder that someone's either died or nearly has. You pause in the middle of stacking kindling to listen, counting each chime like you're measuring time in lives lost. 5 rings. That's what they do now. 1 for each soul claimed by the season. When you finally spot him, he's a smudge against the white landscape, trudging through the snow in a long black cloak, the hem stiff with frost. His hair, once bright, has greyed out completely, and he leans harder on his walking stick than he did last year. He's hunched, not from age, though he's earned every line in his face, but from exhaustion. You've never seen him without his little iron bell, looped through a leather strap clanging softly as he walks, a funeral on legs. You don't envy the priest. No one does. His work doesn't stop just because the roads are iced over and the graveyard is frozen like stone. If anything, winter gives him more work. He's part chaplain, part doctor, part therapist, part gravedigger. He speaks blessings with a voice gone hoarse from cold air and grief. You've watched him pray over infants with blue lips, over old men who coughed themselves empty, and once, over a dog, because the owner insisted it had a soul. The priest didn't argue. He just rang his bell and muttered the rites. He arrives at your door in the early evening. The fire is low, and you've just settled down with a half bowl of carrot and barley mush. He doesn't knock, just scrapes his knuckles lightly against the wood. You open the door, let in a blast of cold air and the thick smell of wool and ash. He's smiling. Not the happy kind of smile, just the I'm still alive kind. He nods at you, then at your mother behind you. Heard about your grandmother, he says, voice rough like old parchment. Sorry I couldn't come sooner. 3 houses ahead of yours. He doesn't offer excuses. He knows you won't ask for any. Instead, he steps inside without waiting for an invitation and moves toward the hearth like a moth drawn to light. You pour him a ladle of broth and hand him a crust of bread so hard it could probably dent armour. He thanks you anyway, soaking it in the bowl before chewing slowly. Between bites, he asks about your sister, about your arm, about whether the fever's come back. You answer honestly, because there's no point lying in front of someone who sees death more often than sleep. After he eats, he pulls a small wooden box from inside his cloak, his portable altar. You've seen it before. It's been everywhere, in crumbling homes, in barns where babies are born beside shivering cows, even in the woods once when someone died on the road and no one dared move the body before the priest had spoken over it. He sets it down, opens it, and pulls out a few cloth-wrapped items. A little silver cross worn smooth from handling, a tiny bottle of holy water, a brittle book of rites. He asks if he may say words over your grandmother, even if she's already been gone a few days. Your mother nods. You fetch the bundle from the cold shed. The linen now stiff, the body inside lighter than you remember. You set it beside the hearth, and the priest kneels. He rings the bell 3 times, low and slow, then begins the rites. His Latin is choppy, rushed. He stumbles over parts but keeps going. You close your eyes. You don't understand the words, but they're heavy. They hang in the room like smoke. When it's over, he stands up with effort, joints cracking. He doesn't say anything sentimental, doesn't offer platitudes, just places a hand briefly on your shoulder and nods once like, "There, you did what you could." But he doesn't leave right away. He stays, warming his hands by the fire. Then he pulls a bottle from inside his cloak, thick, cloudy liquid, probably apple spirit, and offers it to your mother. She hesitates, then drinks, then passes it to you. You take a long pull. It burns all the way down and wakes something up in your gut you didn't realise had gone numb. The conversation turns, slowly, to the state of the village. He tells you 4 more homes are sick, that the blacksmith's wife has been keeping her children under the bed to conserve heat, that a woman gave birth 2 nights ago with no midwife, no clean cloth, just a sister and a fire pot. The baby lived, the mother didn't. You ask if he's afraid. He chuckles, shakes his head. Of dying? No, he says, but I'm afraid of not being useful, of being too tired, of not showing up when I should. That, he says, is the real shame, not showing up. Before he leaves, he offers to bless the house. Your mother nods. He dips his fingers in the holy water and flicks droplets around the room. They freeze almost instantly where they land near the window. He mutters a few more words, draws a rough cross above the lintel with his thumb, then gathers his things. As he walks out, he says, "Keep the fire high, feed each other, don't forget to sing." Then he's gone, bell swinging behind him, vanishing into the blue-grey dark. That night, your mother hums the tune he mentioned. Just a simple melody, the kind people sing without realizing. Your sister joins in, off-key and sleepy. You hum too. And suddenly the house doesn't feel quite so small. The fire looks a little warmer. The wind outside sounds a little less like it's trying to tear the world in half. You fall asleep listening to their voices, that melody still circling in your ears, as if the priest's blessing lingers in the smoke curling toward the ceiling. Maybe it does, or maybe it's just a trick of the warmth, but for once you don't dream of snow. They start showing up at the edge of the village one by one like shadows blown in on the wind. At first, it's just a woman in a grey cloak sitting on a tree stump near the old chapel, hands folded, lips blue. No one saw her arrive. She doesn't speak, doesn't beg, just watches the road with eyes that have seen too many winters and too little mercy. By midday, there are 3 more, 2 men and a child, wrapped in rags, shoes barely held together, faces raw from the cold. Outcasts, vagabonds, the hungry, the lost. They're not from here. That much is obvious. You know everyone in your village, even the ones you don't like. These are strangers, and strangers in winter are complicated. They bring stories, they bring diseases, but most of all, they bring needs you can't afford to fill. Still, you watch them from the window, from behind the shutter's slats, trying to figure out if they're dangerous or just desperate. Your mother says nothing about them for the first 2 days, just pulls the curtain tighter and checks the door twice each night. She knows how quickly kindness can turn into regret. But your sister leaves a crust of bread by the chapel post that evening, and the next morning it's gone. The strangers are still there, still silent, just waiting. You've heard what happens to beggars in winter. The cities lock their gates. Some manors post guards to drive them away with sticks. A few places the lords offer shelter in exchange for labour, but more often they just take what little the beggars have left and call it tax. Once you heard of a group turned away from a church and frozen solid by morning. People walked past them like they were snowmen. No one said a word. By the end of the week there are nearly a dozen. Some crouch behind sheds, others sleep under the eaves of barns, huddled in piles like they're trying to merge into a single body for warmth. One woman has wrapped her hands in old fishnet tied with twine. A boy wears half a boot, dragging the other foot through the snow like it weighs 100 pounds. They don't beg loudly. They're too far gone for that. Hunger makes you quiet, makes you small. You recognise it in them because you've seen it in your mother's eyes, in the mirror. The dull kind of need that stops demanding and starts just existing. Some villagers start whispering about them, that they're thieves, that they bring the plague, that they're witches, maybe, cast out from another town. You hear an old man say, "If they freeze, it's not our fault." But he doesn't say it very loud. No one's in a hurry to test whether God is still listening this winter. On the 3rd night, one of them dies. It's a woman, probably no older than your mother, slumped against the chapel wall. Her lips are cracked open, eyes frozen halfway shut. One hand rests on her chest like she was still praying when her heart stopped. The priest rings the bell at dawn, but only once, a mercy bell. He doesn't try to move her, just covers her with a blanket and waits for the cart. You're the one who brings her a cup of water. Too late, of course. You knew it was. But something in you needed to do something. The cup tips out of your hands when you see her up close, shattering in the snow. Her face doesn't look scared. That's what stays with you. Your mother tells you to keep inside, that people are already tense, that sharing too much will bring trouble. You don't argue. But that night, you slip out with a heel of bread stuffed in your pocket and leave it beside the barn. You don't see who takes it, but it's gone by morning. You start seeing the outcasts differently after that. Not as ghosts, not as warnings, as people. One of them, a man with a burned face and a stitched coat, nods to you when you walk by. Just once. You nod back. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. The debate finally breaks out in the village square. about what to do, about whether to let them stay. Some argue they're a danger, that if you help one, 20 more will follow. Others say they'll die if turned away. The priest listens, then raises a hand. We're all one bad frost away from sitting in the snow ourselves, he says. Remember that. No one argues after that. Not out loud. A compromise is struck. The outcast can stay, near the village, but not in it. They're given the old lean-to near the tannery, mostly empty now. A few villagers, including you, start leaving scraps and cloth there. Nothing valuable. Just the things you can part with. Boiled roots, broken mittens, firewood too damp to burn well but still better than nothing. It's not charity. Not really. It's acknowledgement. A silent pact between people who know what it means to scrape by with nothing but fingernails and breath. One morning, you find a small wooden carving near your door. A little horse, whittled from pine, no more than a few inches tall. It's smooth and detailed, too carefully made to be coincidence. No note, just the carving. You hold it in your hand, turning it over, feeling the grooves. Someone is saying thank you, without saying anything at all. Later you learn it was the boy with one boot. He used to be a carpenter's apprentice in a village that burned down during a raid last spring. He hasn't spoken since, but he carves when he's cold, when he's scared, when he doesn't know what else to do. His pockets are full of shavings and tiny wooden figures, animals mostly, but also people, tiny prayers, shaped into form. That night, the wind rises again. Snow falls hard. You huddle near the hearth with your sister, the little horse tucked beside the candle on the mantel. You wonder how the outcasts are faring in the lean-to, whether their fire is still going, whether they'll survive the storm. You want to believe they will, that somehow small kindnesses can carry a person further than food or firewood ever could, that you haven't just delayed the inevitable, because in winter, every soul that survives is a defiance, and every act of mercy, no matter how small, is a protest against the cold that wants to swallow you all. You hear it in whispers before you hear it in words, stories carried on smoky breath by people who've been stuck indoors too long, with not enough food and far too much fear. Winter makes storytellers of everyone, even those with nothing useful to say. One woman swears she saw hoofprints on the roof of her cottage, deep and sharp, without snow blown inside. Someone else says they heard voices in the woods that didn't echo like normal ones. And then, the oldest tale of all resurfaces, the one that creeps into every hut, every circle around the fire. The frost spirits have returned. You've heard versions of it your whole life. The names change, the shapes too. Sometimes it's a pale woman with white eyes who walks barefoot over frozen ponds, looking for liars to drown beneath the ice. Other times it's an old man with antlers who leans over rooftops and whispers into chimneys, sowing coughs in the lungs of children. Or worse, a spirit made of snow and smoke who eats warmth itself, slipping through cracks in walls and devouring the fire from inside the logs. In your village they call it whiteroot. Not because of how it looks, but because it settles into you like something growing, curling up from the spine until your breath turns cold and your heart goes quiet. Most people pretend not to believe it, but when a goat is found frozen stiff in the barn one morning, standing upright, eyes wide, untouched by wolves or illness, no one says it's natural. They just light more candles and speak a little more softly for the rest of the day. Your sister asks you that night while you're wrapping her in blankets and tucking her under your shared fur, "Do you think whiteroot is real?" You pause. You could laugh it off. Could tell her it's just a story, but then again, so is most of your life. I think cold makes people see things, you say, and fear does the rest. She thinks about this. But that's not a no. You don't answer. The next day someone scrawls a symbol on the chapel door, a jagged circle with 3 spikes radiating outward, carved with a knife. You've seen it before, charcoal drawings in the margins of old books, scratched into barn beams in the older parts of the village. A ward, a warning, maybe both. The priest wipes it off, but not before copying it into a little notebook he keeps in his belt. Superstition, he says when people ask, but he doesn't. Sound as certain as he used to. Stories spread faster in winter than fire ever could. When the world goes quiet, the imagination fills in the blanks. You hear about a man in a distant village who chopped off his own fingers after dreaming they'd turn to ice while he slept. Another woman buried herself in the snow to confuse the frost demons, only to be dug out days later, frostbitten and raving. No one knows if any of it's true, but that's the thing about winter. It doesn't care what's true. It only cares what feels true. And right now, everything feels wrong. Your mother tells you to stay away from the woods after dark. You've been doing that anyway, but her voice carries a sharpness that makes you pause. Things move out there, she says. Not animals, not people either. You ask her what she means, and she just shakes her head. Things that make no sound when they step. Things that look at you without eyes. Later, you find her stuffing bits of blessed candle wax into the gaps around the doorframe. She doesn't explain herself, and you don't ask. You start noticing how every family has their own ritual. The miller's wife sprinkles ash in a circle around her doorstep. The blacksmith hangs a bundle of garlic and hawthorn above the window. Marit the healer leaves a bowl of broth outside each night for the ones passing through. When you ask her if she means people or spirits, she just smiles in that tight-lipped way of hers and says, "Does it matter?" Your mother starts burning juniper in the hearth once a week. It smells sharp and clean, cuts through the lingering scent of sweat and wood smoke. "Keep sickness away," she says. But she lights it while muttering something under her breath that doesn't sound like a prayer. You recognise only one word: old. Your sister starts drawing chalk lines on the floor before bed. Circles, triangles, little figures with star-shaped heads and no mouths. You ask her where she saw them. She shrugs. "Dreams," she says. "I think they're from before." "From before what?" She doesn't say. You laugh a little the first time you see her kneeling by the fire, blowing softly across the coals and whispering. "It's not real," you say. Fire doesn't care what you say to it. "Then it won't mind listening," she replies. You want to believe it's all nonsense. Just winter playing tricks, stretching the imagination to fill the hours between dusk and dawn. But some part of you, buried, ancient, can't quite shake the feeling that there's more to it. That when people gather around the fire and whisper their stories into the flickering dark, they're not just telling tales, they're building walls, thin ones, shaky ones, but walls all the same. There's a moment one night, just a moment, when you wake up to silence. Not the soft kind, the wrong kind. The fire's out and your breath fogs instantly in the air. Everyone's still asleep. You lie there, wide-eyed, blankets pulled up to your chin. And you feel it. A presence. Something just outside the walls. Not footsteps, not knocking, just pressure. Like something leaning in. You hold your breath. Listen. Nothing. The next morning the snow around the door looks undisturbed, but you swear the frost on the inside of the shutters has new patterns. Spirals like curling vines. Or fingers. You don't mention it. Not to your mother, not to your sister, not even to the priest when he passes by later, face pale and drawn. You just stoke the fire a little higher that night, press your palm to the stone chimney, and whisper something yourself. Not a prayer, not exactly, just a thought, a warning, or maybe a plea, because even if Whiteroot isn't real, winter is, and sometimes it needs to believe you're just as dangerous as it is. You can't remember the last time you heard anyone laugh. Not a real laugh, not the tight, exhausted exhale people give when someone makes a grim joke about eating their boots, but the kind that comes from somewhere deep, unplanned. It's been weeks, maybe months. So when your sister lets out a burst of giggles after seeing her reflection in the ice-covered wash basin, face smudged with soot and hair sticking up like a startled goose, you just stare at her like she's grown antlers. She laughs harder under your gaze and your mother cracks the faintest smile before covering it with her hand. It doesn't last, nothing joyful does, not in the dead of winter. But for a moment, your home feels less like a shelter and more like a place people might actually live in. That's something, isn't it? That night, as the cold winds push against the walls like they're trying to move the house itself, your mother lights a candle and sets a carved wooden figure on the table. A little statue of a robed man holding a key. It's old. So old the face is worn smooth from years of hands polishing it like river stone. You recognise it immediately. St. Celsus, the patron of locks, doors and hidden warmth. You haven't seen him since last winter. You were raised with saints, of course. Everyone is. There's a saint for everything. St. Gowina for clean water, St. Muldrick for sore joints, St. Theda for surviving childbirth. You've never paid them much mind, to be honest. Not until the days turned so short you started measuring them in logs burned and spoons scraped. Your mother whispers a small prayer to Celsus and touches her lips, then the statue's head. You do the same, out of habit more than belief. Your sister presses her forehead to the table and hums. You don't ask why. In the corner of the room, near the smoke-darkened beams, a small shelf holds a few more figures. Hand-carved saints passed down through generations. There's St. Briona, holding a bundle of dry kindling, St. Roth, a bearded man said to have slept for 7 winters in a hollow tree. And then there's the strange one. No name, just a wide-eyed face and a circle etched in its chest. You've never been able to decide if it's comforting or terrifying. Your grandmother used to say it was the one who watches when no one else does. Each night now, the ritual grows a little longer. Candles lit, figures arranged just so, prayers whispered. Sometimes your mother offers a few drops of melted tallow in a small bowl, or sprinkles dried herbs on the fire. It's not just religion, it's choreography, a kind of theatre against despair. You find yourself watching her hands as she performs it. Fluid, practiced, like a dance she learned so young she forgot it had steps. When you ask her if the saint's really here, she replies without looking up, "If they don't, at least they keep us speaking." That hits harder than it should. The priest, too, has taken to invoking the saints more often during his visits. He carries a satchel now filled with tiny relics, bits of cloth, bone fragments, painted tiles. None of them verified, of course, just stories wrapped in fabric. He hands one to your mother during his latest visit. A splinter of wood, supposedly from St. Vecla's walking staff. "For the weak in breath," he says, "keep it near the hearth. It smells like old wax and pine sap." You place it beside the saint figures, unsure whether you believe it's sacred or just sentimental. But that's the thing, isn't it? In winter, belief doesn't need proof. It just needs repetition. And people believe harder in winter. You see it on every face, hear it in every whispered petition. People who barely bow their heads in summer now kneel in the snow until their knees go purple. They mutter novenas while fetching water, carve crosses into loaves of bread, and chant psalms under their breath as they stir the pot. One man, Edron, the Thatcher's cousin, carved a small chapel out of snow, said he saw St. Breo in a dream sitting by a fire weeping for all the ones freezing in silence. You go to see it one morning. It's rough, childlike, more of a shrine than a chapel, but it has a beauty to it. Inside, tucked in the hollowed snow, is a small candle burning in a bowl of oil. The flame flickers blue, its warmth barely perceptible, but people come by to kneel in front of it anyway. You recognize one of the beggars you gave food to last week, leaning against the side, head bowed. It would be easy to mock all of this if it weren't for the silence winter brings, the kind of silence that presses down on you until your thoughts start echoing. You begin to understand why people need to believe something is listening. If not the saints, then someone, anyone. You find yourself talking to them sometimes, quietly, while you're alone. Not formal prayers, just thoughts, questions, small admissions you don't say out loud to your family. "I'm afraid we'll run out of wood. I think my mother is hiding how tired she is. I keep seeing something move in the trees. You." Never get an answer, of course, but saying it out loud still helps. It marks the space where hope might eventually fit. Your sister starts drawing tiny saint figures in the frost on the window panes. Some of them are familiar, others not at all. You ask her where she learns the new ones. She shrugs and says, "They tell me their names." You pretend she's joking. One night you wake to the sound of your mother whispering to St. Briona. You don't interrupt. You just listen. Her voice is thin, threadbare. She's not asking for riches, not even health. Just firewood, just for the stew to last until morning, just for the roof not to collapse if the snow pile's too high. Simple things, humble things, things even saints might be able to grant. By late January, nearly every house in the village has a little shelf like yours. Tiny altars patched together from memory and rumour. Figures carved from bone, clay, wood. One family, out of candles, started painting eyes on dried beans and lining them up along the window ledge like miniature sentinels. Another tied ribbons to a pine bough and hung it above the hearth, calling it St. Ola's Ladder. You don't question any of it anymore. The saints may not walk among you, but belief does. It fills the spaces the cold can't quite reach, wraps around the silence, fills the cracks in your thoughts before despair can sneak in, and maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Because when the wind howls like something with a name, when the fire burns low and your stomach is hollow and the sky refuses to brighten for the third day in a row, you still have something to whisper to, even if it's only wood and wax. You press your fingers to St. Celsus's little wooden head, say nothing, and then get back to work. The Lord's Manor looms over your village like a stone reminder that someone else is always colder than you, or warmer, depending on where you fall in the hierarchy that day. It's not far, just uphill, behind the woodshed-lined path where the trees have been shaved clean for firewood, and the snow lies trodden and grey with ash. You see it often, squatting behind its high wall, with its small tower and smoke twisting steadily from the chimney. Even in the dead of winter, that chimney never stops. People assume lords live comfortably through the cold months, but you've been up there. You've felt the chill that lives inside those thick stone walls. The manor isn't cosy. It's a cold, echoing mouth that swallows warmth the second you strike a fire. Stone does that. It doesn't just resist heat, it absorbs it, like it's holding a grudge. The Lord's name is Sabalian. You rarely speak to him directly, but you know his voice. It's precise and quiet, like he doesn't have to shout because everything in the room listens to him anyway. He's not cruel, not the kind of lord who kicks dogs or takes a tithe from your last crust of bread. But he doesn't smile either. His expression rarely changes, even when someone's kneeling in front of him begging for grain. The steward, though, is another story. Moorbrand. Sharp eyes, sharper tongue, face like sour milk. He's the one who knocks when you've missed your tax, who measures your sacks of barley with that iron scoop of his that's mysteriously deeper than yours. He walks the village with a ledger and a cloak heavier than anyone else's, puffed up like a partridge and just as smug. Today, you're summoned. Not by name, not with urgency. Just a message, passed from mouth to mouth until it reaches your door. The manor requires hands, that's all. Your mother nods when you tell her, already wrapping your cloak tighter around your shoulders. You grab your gloves, your scarf, and a bit of smoked meat for the road. She squeezes your arm before you go. Not comfort exactly. More like a ritual you've both come to rely on. The snow is deeper near the manor. Less foot traffic. More wind. The road turns icy beneath your boots, and every few steps you feel the give of packed frost cracking underneath. When you reach the gate, the steward is already waiting, arms crossed, breath fogging in sharp bursts. He gestures you in without a word. Inside, it's both grander and more miserable than you remember. The main hall is tall, vaulted like a chapel, with narrow windows and a fire burning at one end in a hearth as big as your entire house. The fire's roaring, yes, but it still doesn't touch the chill in the air. The heat rises, leaves the floor cold, and settles somewhere far above your head like a secret you'll never be let in on. You're led to the kitchen first. The cook, a red-faced woman named Elga, is snapping orders like twigs. She points at a pile of root vegetables and says, "Clean, peel, sort, and don't toss the skins. We boil them later." You get to work, hands already aching before the second turnip's done. Others are there too. A few girls from the village, eyes red with cold, a boy with frostbitten ears who keeps coughing into his sleeve. No one talks, just work, breath, chop, stack. You don't see the Lord until late afternoon. He steps into the kitchen briefly to request mulled wine. Elga bows low. You mimic her awkwardly. He doesn't look at you, just says something about the fire being low and disappears again. His boots echo on the stone like they're walking through a tomb. There's talk among the staff, quiet and bitter. The manor is cold because someone bungled the firewood deliveries. They expected more carts from the eastern forest, but the roads are snowed over and the oxen have gone lame. Even nobility can't summon heat out of thin air. You hear that the Lord sleeps in his study now, with 2 dogs at his feet and a bearskin thrown over his shoulders. Rumour says he's stopped receiving guests, that he fears illness. One girl says his hair has turned white since autumn. You don't know if it's true, but you picture him in his grand hall, surrounded by stone, wrapped in furs and silence. At one point, you're sent to the cellars. It's colder down there than outside. Deep stone corridors lined with barrels, sacks and crates. A man named Hob gives you a torch and points you toward the salted meats. You haul a sack of pork back up the stairs, each step stinging your thighs with effort. By the time you reach the top, your breath is rasping and your gloves are soaked with sweat. You earn your wages that day, a half loaf of good brown bread, still warm, and a bit of dried fig you haven't tasted in years. The steward tosses it into your hands like he's doing you a favour. You don't thank him, not aloud. As you're leaving, you glance back once. The manor is still, quiet except for the wind howling through the upper halls. No laughter, no music, just shadows moving behind thick curtains and servants moving like ghosts. It's not what people think it is, not warm and golden and safe. It's just a bigger, fancier kind of survival. You walk home with the bread tucked deep in your coat and your fingers stiff from the chill. The village seems smaller when you return, its roofs hunched under snow like weary shoulders. But your house smells like smoke and onions, and your sister lights up when she sees the fig in your hand. You break it into thirds, one for each of you. It tastes sharp and sweet, like sun and sugar, like something from another life. As you eat, you think about the Lord in his stone hall. You wonder if he's doing the same thing, breaking his own food into parts, counting the days until spring. You wonder if he talks to saints, if he mutters at the fire like your mother does. Probably not. But even in a house of stone, winter makes everyone equal, at least a little. The manor's halls echo differently when you're allowed inside. You return the following week, same message passed along from neighbour to neighbour. The Lord's court is being held. Extra hands needed. The word court sounds grand, even a bit absurd, like something that should involve silk and feasts and heralds with shiny horns. You imagine nobles sitting around a roaring fire, sipping wine from goblets, laughing over games while servants feed logs into the hearth like fuel into a dragon's belly. But what you walk into is something far less magnificent. The main hall has been swept and scrubbed, candles lit in every sconce, and the long table at the front dressed in a faded cloth embroidered with threadbare lions. A few noblemen and women are seated in stiff-backed chairs, their shoulders hunched in layers of velvet and fur, eyes red from windburn and too much wine. The hearth blazes behind them, crackling loud against the silence in the room. You feel the heat on your cheeks, but only your cheeks. The rest of your body still tingles with cold, like you're only warm by proximity and not by right. You're given a tray. Wooden cups, mostly full of weak ale or warm cider, a few. Platters of pottage and baked root vegetables dressed up with spices you haven't smelled since last year. You serve quietly, as trained, and try not to look anyone in the eye. It's not that you're afraid. You're simply invisible here. That's the trick with nobility. They pretend servants are furniture until they want something, and then they expect you to be psychic. One lady drops her spoon. It clatters to the floor beside you. She gives you a look that could melt steel, as if you're personally responsible for gravity. You pick it up and hand it back, her gloved fingers barely brushing yours. She doesn't say thank you. None of them do. But you're not really here for them. You're here to observe, and what you see makes your skin prickle more than the wind outside. They're bored. All of them. Not frightened, not hungry, just bored. The conversation drips slowly across the table. Complaints about how long the snow has lasted, how the roads are impassable, how the neighbouring manor hasn't responded to a letter sent 2 weeks ago. Someone jokes that perhaps the messenger froze in place, still clutching the scroll. Mild chuckles follow. You glance at the servant beside you, a boy from the next village over, and see he's biting the inside of his cheek hard enough to leave a mark. Sir Barlian sits at the head of the table, still and tired-looking. His hands are clean, his clothes richly dyed, but his eyes give him away. They're sunken, exhausted. He hasn't slept well. He picks at his food more than he eats it. When someone makes a joke about boiling the steward if the firewood runs out, Barlian forces a smile, then goes quiet again. At one point, a man from another manor, a guest, judging by his accent, slams his cup on the table and says, "Why not hunt? There must be game left. Something still moving in the woods." Someone else chimes in. "Let the peasants flush them out. Promise them a silver penny for every squirrel." The room laughs, a bit louder this time. You say nothing. You know there's no game, not within a day's walk. Every rabbit's already been caught. every deer long gone or long eaten. The woods are still and strange now, haunted by cold and rumours, not fur and hoofbeats. When they pause to drink, you retreat to the side of the hall with the other servants. The kitchen maid beside you mutters, "They don't know what real cold is." Her voice is low, bitter. They think it's something that happens to the air, not to your bones. You nod, silently. She's right. Later, the games begin. Cards, dice, low-stakes betting. Nothing wild, just something to do, something to pretend the hours aren't dragging behind them like a dead horse. One man bets a golden ring on a single roll of the dice and loses. He laughs like it doesn't matter. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe he has 10 more just like it. Maybe he's so far from need he's forgotten what need looks like. But you haven't. You remember how thin your sister's arms felt when you helped her stand after her fever. You remember licking the inside of a broth bowl for the last hint of fat. You remember your grandmother's silence when she could no longer speak. At the far end of the hall, a bard has been hired to play. He strums a lute so softly it sounds more like weeping than music. No one really listens. It's background noise. Pretty misery for bored ears. Eventually the court ends. The guests yawn and stretch, retreating to their rooms or back to the fire. You're given another half loaf of bread, this time with a smear of soft cheese. It tastes like it came from another life. You eat it slowly, letting each bite soften on your tongue, as if you could stretch it into minutes. On your way out, the steward stops you. "You've got strong hands," he says. "Come back tomorrow. We'll need someone to chop the ice near the horse's trough." You nod. You don't want to. Your arm still aches from the wound, but you'll do it. Not because you owe them anything, but because that bread might be the difference between your sister waking up strong or coughing herself into another fever. When you return home, your house feels different. Smaller, but warmer too in its own stubborn way. The fire flickers gently, and your mother has stitched another patch into the curtain. Your sister is already asleep, curled beside the hearth, and the little carved saint you keep near the fire is wearing a tiny scrap of red cloth like a shawl. She must have dressed it herself. You sit down, the taste of cheese still lingering, and realise something strange. The manor may be richer, but it isn't safer. They're just better at pretending. They have more food, but less warmth, more light, but less meaning. You survived another day. You fed your family. You left the room with more hope than the people who never leave theirs. And in this winter, that counts for everything. Christmas arrives like a ghost, not with trumpets or laughter, but with a soft, aching sort of memory that settles into your bones before the sun even rises. You don't wake up with joy in your chest or a fire crackling with extra warmth. You wake up to the usual numbness in your fingers and the sting of cold in your lungs. But still, it's Christmas. It means something, or at least it used to. You remember better Christmases, ones with dried fruit in the bread, with roasted meat and singing that echoed down the village path. There was a year when your uncle brought candied nuts wrapped in linen. Another when your grandmother played the old fiddle, the sound of it cutting through the cold like a heartbeat. Even last year, lean as it was, someone slaughtered a boar, and the whole village gathered to share it, tearing into the meat with greasy smiles and laughing, even as snow drifted down from the rafters. But this year feels quieter. The snow falls heavier, thicker, like it's trying to smother celebration before it can catch fire. The village bell rings twice in the morning, more out of duty than joy. You walk outside, boots crunching on the frozen path, and see a few others heading toward the chapel, cloaks drawn tight, eyes half-lidded with exhaustion. No one's smiling. Everyone's just trying to keep moving like Christmas is something to endure, not enjoy. Still, the chapel looks different today. Someone, probably Marit, swept the steps clear of snow and hung a small bundle of evergreen above the door. A few tallow candles flicker in the windows, melting slow rivers of wax onto the stone. Inside it smells of pine resin and old incense. The fire is burning high, and for once you can feel its warmth even before you sit down. The priest wears his best robes, though the gold thread is frayed and one sleeve is visibly patched. His voice is rough from cold, but he speaks with a quiet determination that makes the room lean in. He talks of hope, of light returning, of the child born in a stable who survived cold and hunger and fear. He talks about endurance, not miracles, about how holiness isn't always loud. It's sometimes just choosing to wake up again, to keep going, even when it hurts. You find yourself gripping the edge of the pew more tightly than expected. You're not particularly pious, but today you listen. Afterward, the villagers exchange quiet greetings, muffled by scarves and fatigue. No one lingers. There's no feast waiting, no dancing. But something has softened. You see it in the way people pause to look at each other, to nod slowly, to acknowledge that they're still here. That in itself is a kind of gift. When you return home, your mother is humming to herself, a tune you recognise but don't know the name of. She has something baking in the pan over the hearth, flat cakes made with flour and a bit of lard. She saved the last of the dried berries to press into the centre of each one. It's not much, but it smells sweet and warm, and just for today, that's enough. Your sisters made decorations. Twigs twisted into stars, bundled herbs tied with scraps of thread. She's hung them from the ceiling beams like little charms. To make the house remember it's still alive, she says. You smile at that. She's right. The house does feel more alive, more like something that breathes with you, rather than something you're trapped inside of. You eat the cake slowly, savouring the taste of sweetness that cuts through the months of bland and bitter. Each bite is soft in the middle, crispy at the edges, and warm enough to make you forget how hungry you still are. Your mother lights a candle and sets it near the window. For those who didn't make it, she says quietly, she doesn't need to name names. You all have your list. In the afternoon, the manor sends a cart down the hill. Not much. A barrel of sour ale, a sack of flour, some dried beans and turnips. There's a note pinned to the sack in the steward's neat, joyless script. By order of Sir Barlian, in the spirit of the day. No one says thank you, but no one turns it down either. Hunger humbles you faster than anything else. Later, a few villagers gather near the green, the open patch in the centre of the village buried now beneath a crust of hard snow. Someone starts singing. It's quiet, off-key, but it spreads. A second voice joins in, then a third. The song is old, the kind you only remember the second verse to once the first is already halfway through. You don't sing at first, you just listen, the sound cutting through the stillness like a single bell in a foggy field. Then you open your mouth and let the words fall out, rough and cracked but real. Your sister tugs your hand and starts spinning in small circles, laughing, her scarf trailing like a banner. You join her, just once around, then let her go. For a few seconds the snow seems lighter, the dark seems less pressing. The cold doesn't bite quite as hard. That night you sit beside the hearth and unwrap your gift. Not a real gift, not wrapped in cloth or twine, but something your mother set aside months ago, a single beeswax candle saved for a special day. Light it, she says, handing it to you, and wish for something. You do. You don't say the wish out loud, not because it won't come true, but because you can't quite put it into words. It's not just for food or warmth or even spring. It's something heavier, something quieter, something that sounds like, let us remember how to laugh again. The flame flickers. The house glows. You fall asleep that night full, not in your belly, not entirely, but in the way your limbs stretch out beneath the blankets, in the way the room holds together around you, in the way your sister snores softly with a bit of dried berry juice still on her cheek. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, the dark feels like something that can be waited through, not feared, not fought, just endured. Because Christmas came. It was small, it was strange, but it was here, and so are you. The road to the next village isn't far, 6 miles, maybe 7, but in winter that's a journey you don't take lightly. The path winds through thick woods, then over a narrow creek that freezes into glass this time of year. It dips and rises with frost-rutted hills, flanked by trees that creak and lean in like they're eavesdropping. In summer, it's a pleasant walk. In winter, it's a gamble. But you're out of linen. The last of it went to bandaging your arm after the wound festered. What remains is patched together and stiff with old blood and salt. You also need oil, wax, and, if there's any fortune left in the world, a bit of dried yeast to stretch your flour into bread. Merritt the healer said there's a man in Alderby, the next village over, who might still have stores left. But only if you get there before the other desperate souls do. Your mother doesn't argue when you say you're going. She simply looks at your boots, then at the sky, and hands you the fur-lined cloak that used to belong to your father. It smells like smoke and cold leather. She gives you a slice of dried pork for the road, a stub of candle wrapped in cloth, and a thin bone whistle. For noise, in case you go off the path, she says. You nod like you're not worried, but you are. Everyone is. You leave before dawn when the world is still deep in its half-dreaming state. The village behind you is quiet, dark windows blinking back frost, chimneys puffing thin lines of smoke that vanish almost instantly. The snow crunches beneath your boots, sharp and loud, as if the world wants to keep track of where you're going. The forest comes quickly, and with it, the hush. Even the birds have stopped pretending it's worth singing. You pull your cloak tight and press on, breath fogging in quick bursts. The cold is a living thing here, not just air but pressure. It squeezes your ribs, bites your ears, numbs your fingertips even through your gloves. You pass an old hunting shrine half buried in snow, a post with a carved figure atop it, once bright, now faded to grey. Someone has left a sprig of holly in its hand, and a smear of blood on the base. Fresh. Probably a rabbit. You offer a small nod as you pass. Winter makes you superstitious, or maybe just respectful. By the time the sun breaks through the clouds, weak and silver, you've crossed the halfway point. The creek appears, frozen solid, the surface cracked like old glass. You test it with a stick, then with one boot, heart hammering as you step out. It holds, but it groans beneath you, long and deep. You move fast, eyes locked on the far bank, boots scraping in short, careful strides. Once across, you rest against a snow-covered stump and chew the pork your mother packed. It's tough, but salty and strong, enough to remind you that hunger can be quieted, if only for a while. You sip from your water skin, but the mouth is crusted with ice. You warm it in your hands until the ice breaks loose with a crack. The woods feel different on the Alderby side, darker somehow. The trees are thicker, closer, their branches heavy with snow that droops low like watching eyes. You don't like it. You've heard things, stories from travellers. They say the spirits in these woods aren't content to watch, that they move, that they whisper, that they leave marks in the snow that no animal makes. You tell yourself it's nonsense, that people tell stories because silence is worse. But when you come across tracks that look like bare feet, too small for a man, too wide for a child, you don't follow them. You look straight ahead, breathe slow, and keep walking. By midday, you spot Alderby in the distance. Smoke curls from a few chimneys. The outer fences are buried under drifts. No children playing, no dogs barking. The whole place seems paused. You approach slowly, hands visible, breath steady. A man on the edge of the village, likely their reeve, nods at you and waves you in without a word. Inside, it's more desperate than home. Faces thinner, eyes more hollow. But they've got a stockroom, and coin isn't the only thing that buys favour. You trade some dried herbs and a carved spindle your sister made. Beautiful work, smooth and intricate. The storekeeper accepts it with a grunt and hands you a pouch containing wax, a flask of lamp oil, and a small cake of yeast that you tuck deep into your cloak like it's gold. You stay long enough to warm yourself by the inn's fire. The room is packed, men and women hunched over mugs, the smell of boiled cabbage clinging to everything. No one talks. One man stares into the flames like they owe him an answer. When you leave, the sky's already dimming. You curse yourself for lingering too long. Winter travel is cruel in daylight, lethal at dusk. You move quickly now, retracing your steps, breath rasping in the cold air. The forest is worse in twilight. The snow has settled into your tracks from before, blurring them. Shadows stretch across the path, long and moving even when the wind is still. The trees creak again. You stop once, sure you heard footsteps behind you, but the woods are silent. You clutch the bone whistle in your hand, pulse thudding. You don't blow it. Not yet. You make it to the creek just as the last of the light bleeds from the sky. The ice looks darker now, colder. You cross with slow, precise steps, knees shaking, breath hissing between your teeth. One crack beneath your boot makes your heart lurch, but you don't fall through. The final stretch feels longer. The sky above you turns to velvet, and the stars blink into view, indifferent and sharp. You see the flicker of firelight through the trees. Home. And then, just as you step out of the woods, something howls in the distance. Low, long, not a dog, not close, but not far enough. You don't run. You walk, steady and strong, until you reach the cottage door and slam it behind you, chest heaving. Your mother looks up. Your sister rushes to you. The yeast is still in your pocket. The wax, the oil, safe. You made it. You sit beside the fire, hands trembling, and realise that the worst part wasn't the cold or the dark. It was knowing that if you'd slipped, if you'd fallen through the ice, if something had taken you in the woods, no one would have found you until spring. And by then, you'd be part of the story. You don't tell them about the howl. Not right away. Your mother's already pale, thinner than you remember her being even a month ago, and your sister's clinging to your arm like you're something between a brother and a miracle. You just nod, hand over the goods, and try to get the ice out of your eyelashes without drawing too much attention to the way your hands won't stop shaking. But you think about it all night. You hear it again the next evening. Not close, but not far. Somewhere between the forest's edge and the old mill ruins, that crumbling pile of stone and snow where no one goes unless they've lost a dare or lost their mind. The sound isn't steady. It rises in waves, low, then sharp, like it can't decide what it's trying to be. A warning, a threat, a call. It could be wolves. Everyone says so. Wolves are real. Their teeth leave trails. Their eyes shine in torchlight. They take lambs in the spring and vanish in the dark. People fear wolves, but in the way you fear sharp knives. Not because they're mysterious, but because they're efficient. But that sound you keep hearing, it's different. Your mother bolts the door tighter that night. She doesn't say anything about the noise, but you catch her checking the window 3 times before she sits down. Your sister draws a row of tiny stars in chalk along the bottom of the hearth. You don't ask why. You just let her. The village starts buzzing within the week. The blacksmith hears it while tending his forge at dusk. Says it made the dog go stiff and whine, then bolt under the workbench. Marit claims she saw yellow eyes on the ridge behind her house, though no one else confirms it. The Reeve organises a hunting party. 3 men and a pair of underfed hounds, armed with torches and long knives. They return before midnight, half frozen and empty-handed. No tracks, no blood. Just a silence that made one of them start crying for no reason halfway through the search. The priest gives a sermon the next day, and his voice cracks halfway through. He talks about beasts, yes, but also about fear. About how fear can take shape in the dark and walk on 4 legs. He doesn't name anything. He doesn't have to. That night, you dream of something tall and white, standing still among the trees. It has no face, no fur, just long arms that hang too low, and breath that fogs the air in front of it without sound. You wake up with your hand clenched around the bone whistle, even though you don't remember reaching for it. Your sister finally asks, "Do you think it's wolves?" You shake your head. She doesn't ask again. By the second week of hearing the howls, the village has changed. People are quieter, doors shut faster, fires are stoked earlier. The outer barns, the ones closest to the woods, go unused. One of the cattle freezes to death in the pen because no one wants to risk dragging it to shelter. And then someone goes missing. A boy named Aldrich. 14, maybe 15, wiry and fast. Said he was going to check the traps near the tree line before nightfall, didn't come back. They search. Half the village turns out, bundled in cloaks and scarves, calling his name through cupped hands and cracked lips. You go too, torch in hand, heart beating too loud in your ears. You find nothing, no blood, no tracks, just a single mitten soaked through and frozen solid near the creek. By morning the priest rings the bell. Twice, once for Aldrich, once, perhaps, for the part of the village that went missing with him. The mood changes after that. No one says it aloud, but you see it in their eyes. The cold is no longer the worst part of winter. It's the waiting. Waiting for something to cry out in the dark. Waiting for someone else to vanish. Waiting for the world to shift again, like it always does, one quiet tragedy at a time. You begin to notice things. A pattern of footprints on the edge of your roof, like paws, but too wide, too long. A trail in the snow that loops round your house and leads nowhere. Once, in the early morning, before the sun has decided whether it's worth rising, you see something standing in the woods beyond the field. Just a shape, too tall, too still. It doesn't move when you look at it. It only vanishes when you blink. You start sleeping in your clothes. You keep a stick beside your bed. You relight the fire each time it fades. You whisper names you haven't said in years, names of saints, of ancestors, of stories you used to scoff at. Everyone does. The priest offers nightly prayers now. The chapel's always full, even when the cold makes your breath freeze in the air inside the nave. People hold hands, some cry, some stare into the flame like it might give them a reason. You help your mother reinforce the door with planks. You pack snow against the windows, seal the cracks with cloth. Your sister hangs a charm over the lintel, a woven braid of hair and pine needles tied with red thread. "It's for protection," she says. "From wolves?" "From what wants in," she replies. The next howl comes during supper. You all freeze, spoons hovering, breath caught in your throats. It's closer now, not right outside, but closer, as if it knows the name of your street, the shape of your door. Your mother sets her spoon down and says, "There are worse things than hunger." And you believe her, because now, when you close your eyes, it's not food you dream of. It's fire, walls, bolts, and the sound of snow shifting outside your window. You don't know what it is. Maybe wolves, maybe something older. But you know this. Whatever's howling, it's not doing it to scare you. It's doing it to remind you. You're not alone. Not out here. Not in the dark. The well freezes on a Tuesday. Not slowly. Not in increments like it has the decency to warn you. One morning it just stops giving. You lower the bucket down and it hits something solid. Not the soft splash of liquid, but a thick, dull knock. You haul it up and find the rope wet with ice, and the bucket's rim crusted in frost. You try again, lower and lower, until the pulley groans and the rope shudders from strain. But it's no use. The water's there, yes, but entombed in ice as thick as your thigh. It's not unheard of. Wells freeze in winters like this. But it usually doesn't happen until deep February, and it's only mid-January. Which means this cold, this deep, bone-piercing cold, is either worse than anyone thought, or it's not going to end anytime soon. The village wakes to the news like it's heard of a death. The well is more than just a hole in the ground. It's a promise, a source. The idea that no matter how little you eat or how long the nights stretch, you can still drink. Without it, everything gets smaller. There's the creek, of course, but it's a half-mile walk through the woods, and the last thing anyone wants to do is trudge toward a frozen stream while the woods are still echoing with the things that howl after sunset. Still, it has to be done. You volunteer, you wrap yourself in every layer you own. 2 pairs of wool trousers, 3 shirts, a fur-lined tunic that smells like smoked meat, and your father's old cloak. Your boots are already cracked near the toe, but you bind them with twine and leather strips until they hold. Then you take the bucket and the sled, nothing fancy, just a few boards nailed to old runners, and head off into the trees. The world outside your door is brutal. The snow crunches and cracks beneath your steps like glass breaking in slow motion. Your breath fogs thick and white, curling around your face like a veil. Even the trees look brittle, their limbs stiff with frost, bark turning pale like old bones. Everything is still, too still, like the world is holding its breath. You keep your eyes on the path, don't look into the trees, don't count the shadows. When you reach the creek, it's exactly as you expected. Frozen solid, except for one narrow spot where the current has fought through, a black gash in the white crust. You crack the ice along the edge with a stick, careful not to fall in, and scoop the water into your bucket one slow ladle at a time. It's clean, clear, cold enough to sting your hands like nettles. You fill 2 buckets, tie them to the sled, and start back. Halfway through, you hear something. Not loud, just the faintest rustle behind the trees, like someone dragging cloth through branches. You stop, listen. But the wind is dead today. No rustling, no birds, just that one soft shuffle. You walk faster. You get home, unload the buckets, and say nothing. Your mother sees the colour drained from your face and doesn't ask questions. She just takes the water and starts boiling it, as if warmth can erase fear. Your sister peeks out the window every hour on the hour, eyes narrow. You're not the only one making the trip. Every able-bodied person in the village takes turns, some with sleds, others with baskets lined in fur or canvas. Marek goes twice a day. The priest goes with the smith, who carries a spear now, even during daylight. A few people bring dogs. The dogs grow quiet in the woods, not alert, subdued, like they know not to draw attention. Then one morning a boy named Tiller doesn't come back. He was 12, small, quick, clever. He'd made the trip before, once with his father, once with a neighbour, but this time he went alone. Said he could do it. Said he wasn't afraid. He never made it back. They search, of course. The whole village again, scouring the path, checking the creek. They find his sled half a mile in, water sloshed out, one bucket cracked. No blood, no footprints beyond his own, just the sled tipped to one side, rope still tied like it had been yanked backward. Someone suggests he fell through the ice, but you were there. You saw that creek. It's not wide enough, not deep enough. And the ice wasn't broken, not even a ripple, just snow, still and clean. That night no one fetches water. The next day people go in pairs. No more solo trips. Children are banned from the path altogether. The water is rationed now, half buckets only. Enough for drinking, not for washing, not for boiling grains, not for soaking sore limbs. Everything begins to taste a little like desperation. Your mother teaches you how to melt snow safely. Boil it 3 times, scrape off the top layer, strain it through cloth. It tastes like nothing, like air. But you drink it anyway. One woman, Lyra, the widow who lives closest to the woods, starts digging her own well by hand. She says the ground near her barn still feels soft, that maybe there's a spring under there. She works until her fingers split. You help her once, just for an hour, your hands stiff and slow with the cold, digging through dirt that's more ice than earth. She thanks you. Her voice cracks, not from emotion, from dryness. You share the last of your boiled snow with her that evening. 3 days later, her barn burns down. No one knows how. The snow should have kept the fire contained, but the roof went up like dry hay. The flames crackled and hissed into the night, and by morning only ash and blackened beams remained. Lyra is fine, shaken, but alive. She says she saw something near the barn just before the fire, something tall, unmoving, with steam rising off its shoulders. The village doesn't question her. From then on, the trips to the creek happen under full sun only. Spears are sharpened, no one whistles, everyone listens, and the well stays frozen. The rope dangles useless. The bucket hangs like a gallows decoration, rim-iced solid. You pass it every day, that mouth of frozen silence, and you wonder what waits beneath. Not just water, but something else, something old, something watching. Because now, even water is a luxury you have to fight for. Even the simplest of needs has a price. And winter is no longer content to starve you. It wants to thirst you too. You've always known fire is life. But now it's all that stands between your family and the end of everything. It's late January, and the cold has reached a level where it doesn't even feel like cold anymore. It feels like pressure, like a slow, relentless hand pushing you deeper into yourself. Each morning you wake with your jaw clenched, your fingers curled in stiff claws around the wool of your blanket, your breath fogging like smoke from a dying candle. The hearth still glows faintly in the darkness, but it's not enough. Not anymore. The woodpile is gone. Not low. Gone. You burned the last of it last night. You stretched it as long as you could, cutting smaller pieces, rationing logs like bread. But the snow's too deep now to go out and cut more. The tools are frozen solid. The path to the woods is buried in drifts higher than your chest, and even if you got out there, the trees would be brittle and dead, and you'd still have to carry the wood back, through that snow, past those trees, past whatever might be in those trees. So you start with the obvious. The old stool in the corner, wobbly, already cracked. You feed it to the fire in pieces, watching the flames lick up the splinters like they're tasting something rich. Then the broken shelf from your grandmother's room. Then the spinning frame your sister hasn't used in months. Every scrap of unused wood becomes a decision. Can we live without this? Can we afford not to? By the end of the week, the house looks emptier. Not because people are missing, but because everything else is. The bench near the door, the small table by the window, the extra crate you once used to store beans. Gone. All of it. The fire eats everything now. Your sister offers her doll. You hesitate. Not because it's valuable. Its head is cracked, and the hair is mostly straw by now, but because it's hers, the last toy, the last reminder of anything resembling childhood. She hands it to you, eyes serious. She's not real, she says. We are. So you burn the doll. And you both sit quietly while the fire flickers, its light dancing across her face like it's trying to make up for what it's taken. You're not alone in this. Across the village, windows grow darker, chimneys smoke less. You hear the knock of axes and the creak of boards being pulled from walls. People are burning shutters, doors, cradles, tools. Someone even chopped down the wooden cross in front of the chapel. The priest said nothing, just stood there, watching, lips moving in silent prayer. It's survival, not desecration. The blacksmith burns his workbench. Marit burns her garden fence. The baker dismantles the counter he once kneaded dough upon, plank by plank. No one's baking anymore. Your mother finds an old chest tucked behind her bed. It's warped and musty, filled with bits of cloth and broken combs. You tear it apart together. The bottom is cedar. It burns better than you expected. But soon, it's not enough. You start thinking in wood. Your eyes scan the room not for comfort or use, but for burnability. The leg of a table, the handle of a broom, the back of a chair. Everything becomes a question of heat. Will this burn? Will it burn clean? Will it burn long enough? And when it's all gone, when there's nothing left but the bed frames and the beams above your head, you start thinking darker. You eye the door frame, the shelves nailed into the wall, the ladder to the loft. You know what comes next. You burn the ladder. It takes effort, pulling the nails free, cracking the joints loose, stacking the pieces neatly beside the hearth. Your mother doesn't stop you. She just watches. Your sister hides in the corner with her blanket pulled over her head. You pretend not to notice. That night the fire burns high. For a while the room is warm enough that you take off your gloves. Your mother even hums a tune, one you don't recognise. You almost forget what you've done to buy that comfort. Almost. But come morning it's cold again. It always is. Fire doesn't last. It never does. It's hunger in reverse, consuming everything you give it and leaving only smoke. Then comes the day you all knew was coming. Your mother points at the chair. Not just a chair. The chair. The one your father built the year before he died. Thick legs, curved back, carved armrests. It was never fancy, but it was his. The one he'd sit in to mend boots, to tell stories, to hold you and your sister when you were too sick to sleep. It's the last thing in the house that still smells like him. She doesn't say anything more. She just points. You carry it to the hearth like a mourner bringing a body to the pyre. You set it down gently. Your sister looks away. You pause, hand on the leg, then break it. One piece at a time, the memories go into the flames. You don't cry, not until later, when the fire's low and the room smells of old smoke and ash, and the space where the chair stood is just empty floor. You cry then, quietly, so no one else has to carry the sound. Later that week, you learn someone tried to burn their front door and froze to death in the night. Another family slept around their fire and woke up with the house filled with smoke. They'd used a beam soaked in pitch, and it nearly choked them all. You hear whispers of a boy who stole firewood from the manor. The steward had him locked in the grain store, and no one's seen him since. The desperation thickens. People start asking questions they wouldn't have dared a month ago. Would a wagon burn? Could we eat the paste that binds the mortar? Is it worth boiling old leather for stew? Can smoke keep the cold out if the flame is gone? You don't know. You just keep feeding the fire, whatever it wants, even if what it wants is you. The thaw doesn't arrive like a saviour. It slithers in like a slow betrayal. At first, it's so subtle you doubt it's real. A softness in the air, the faintest drip from the eaves, a squelch underfoot where there was once only the solid, reliable crunch of snow. The change is almost imperceptible. You want to believe in it, but you've been burned by hope before, or maybe just chilled by it. Then one morning you wake to the sound of water. Not much, just a quiet trickle. But it's there, coming from the wall where the frost used to bloom in elegant, terrifying patterns. Now it drips steadily, a soft rhythm tapping into the silence. You sit up slowly and stare at it like it's a ghost. Outside, the snow is slumped. No longer crisp and bright, it's turned grey, heavy, collapsing inward like a dying breath. Icicles break and fall from rooftops with hollow clunks. The dirt path through the village, once buried beneath drifts, begins to reveal itself, muddy, rutted and veined with slush. Footprints appear again, not just indentations in snow, but dark, wet impressions that fill slowly with water as you watch. The trees begin to drip too. Their limbs sag under the weight of melting ice, shedding it like regret. Every pine and birch seems to be weeping, and maybe they are. Maybe they know what's coming. Because here's the truth no one likes to talk about. The thaw doesn't mean safety. The thaw means rot. It means stink. It means the slow reveal of everything winter had the mercy to hide. You see it first near the chapel. A pile of rags, half covered by snow, turns out to be a body. Old Harlan, the drunk who vanished during a storm in December. His hand is sticking out, fingers curled like he's still holding a cup. The skin is blackened and stiff, like dried meat. No one moves him at first. Just nods quietly and walks past. Then another. Behind the cooper's shed, in a corner no one thought to check. A woman, frozen in place, curled up with a bundle in her arms. When they try to separate her from it, the cloth splits, and underneath is nothing but rags and bone. The baby was already gone, long before the cold took her. There are more, in ditches, against fence posts, in abandoned barns and hollow trees. All the people who slipped out of the village and never returned. Winter kept them from rotting. But now the air begins to change. The smell is slow to rise, but it's there. Faint, sour. It catches in the back of your throat and lingers even after you leave the area. People start covering their mouths with cloth again, not for illness this time, but for dignity. And then come the animals. The snow pulls back to reveal carcasses. Chickens frozen stiff in corners of coops. Pigs collapsed in their pens. A cow half eaten by something, perhaps dogs, or worse. Bones picked cleaner than seems possible. You find birds too. Black feathers clumped in the mud, wings spread like they fell mid-flight. And it's not just the dead things, it's the things that survived. Rats emerge from their burrows, thin and twitchy, eyes too bright. Crows gather in the trees, their calls harsher than usual, like they're mocking you. The dogs have changed, no longer fat and lazy, but lean and cautious, circling anyone carrying food. You help bury the bodies, not just the people you knew, but the ones no one claims. The priest reads from his book in a voice that's barely there. The ground is softening but not soft enough. You dig with picks and crowbars, hacking at frost just under the surface. Your hands blister, then split. The blood stains. The shovel? But you keep going. One evening, while shoveling near the edge of the woods, you dig into something that isn't earth. It's a face. Or it was. Eyes frozen open, mouth slack, skin pale yellow like old wax. You drop the shovel, stagger back, and stare. There's no name to match it with. Just a person. Someone who didn't make it. You cover them with earth anyway. By the end of the week, you stop counting how many. It doesn't matter. Everyone lost someone. Everyone lost something. Your mother takes to boiling water constantly now. Not for cooking, just to keep the smell at bay. Your sister keeps a sprig of mint tucked under her nose. You try not to notice the mildew spreading in the corners of the ceiling or the strange greasy mould clinging to the cracks in the walls. But worst of all is the sound of the thaw, the groaning of wet wood, the steady drip, drip, drip from every surface, the slap of water on mud as snow slides off roofs and crashes to the ground. It's like the world is melting, but not cleanly. It's a slow, wet collapse. And beneath it, the silence has changed. It's not sharp anymore. It's not still. It's sticky. The quiet of rot. The hush that comes not from peace, but from exhaustion. The well finally unfreezes. You celebrate too early. The water that rises is brown and sludgy. You draw up 3 buckets before you stop, staring into the surface as something oily swirls inside. The priest blesses it. Marit filters it through cloth and ash. You boil it 3 times. Still, it tastes like dirt. Like something that's been waiting too long. You drink it anyway. You have to. The worst part is how quickly the thaw tricks you. People smile again. Just once or twice. A child laughs when a crow drops a frozen apple on a man's head. The sun comes out for longer than an hour. Someone finds green under a patch of slush. Moss, maybe. A promise. But it's too early. This isn't spring. This is just the in-between. Where winter lets go, but not completely. Where the ice melts, but the danger hasn't. Where the dead rise, not in story, not with breath, but in presence, in weight, in smell and silence and memory. You sit by the fire that night, water boiling behind you, the smell of mildew in your hair, and you understand something deeply. Surviving winter isn't just about the cold, it's about what's left when the cold begins to go. And right now, it's not all that much. There's a word you keep hearing now. Famine. It rolls off people's tongues like an old friend's name. Not panicked, not shocked, just acknowledged. Like everyone was expecting it to arrive eventually, and now that it's here, it may as well sit at the table with the rest of you. The food stores that were dwindling through winter are now scraped clean. The root cellar is nothing but frost-covered shelves. The barrels are empty. The sacks are gone. Even the bones you boiled twice for broth have been burned for warmth or chewed, until brittle. Your mother tries to hide it, rationing smaller spoonfuls and pretending it's all she planned to serve. Your sister eats slower now, like drawing out the moment might trick her stomach into believing it's full. You've stopped pretending. You feel hunger like a shadow inside your ribs, like a stone wedged behind your heart. It doesn't gnaw. It waits. It lurks. You wake up to it, fall asleep to it. Some days you're so tired you forget what full even felt like. There are rumours, of course there are, of snow still falling up north, of entire villages buried, of city folk eating bark and straw and worse. One traveller passing through, thin, wild-eyed, smelling of salt and desperation, says there are places where people have turned on each other. Not from malice, just survival, just hunger tightening its grip until you look at your neighbour's hand and think, what would it take to eat that? You laugh, but only because you're horrified. Then you stop laughing because you're not entirely sure you wouldn't do the same. The manor still has food. You know this, though no one says it aloud. You see the smoke from the chimney, steady and thick. You catch the scent of meat once, sharp and oily on the wind. You spot a servant hauling a crate into the storage room through a back door. Someone says they've slaughtered one of their own horses, an old war steed that once carried the Lord's brother into battle. A noble sacrifice, they say. Not for glory, for stew. But no one in the village sees any of that. The generosity that once sent down sacks of beans and flour at Christmas hasn't reappeared. The steward avoids the village now, and if anyone goes up to beg, they don't come back with much more than a bruised ego and a warning. The Lord is keeping his stores for spring planting, for his own family, for the future, as if your future matters when your belly's caving in. Some villagers still pretend pride is worth more than pity. They boil bark, they grind acorns into bitter meal, they scrape lichen from the trees and hope their children don't get sick. Others give up the illusion. They go from door to door, asking, first gently, then not so gently. You share what little you can, but it's like feeding the sea with a spoon. One morning you find an old woman collapsed by the well. Her lips are cracked, her skin papery and blue-tinged. She's not dead. Not quite. But her breath is so thin you have to lean close to hear it. You bring her inside, warm her with what little fire you can muster. Feed her broth made from boiled cabbage water and leftover fat. She stays for a day, then dies that night in her sleep. You bury her behind the cottage, quietly, without ceremony. You don't know her name. After that, the doors stay closed tighter. People stop talking, not from selfishness, just fear. There's nothing left to give. You start noticing who's missing. The tall boy who used to carry grain in from the fields, gone. The woman with the limp and the bright laugh, vanished. A pair of brothers who always argued outside the smithy haven't been seen in days. No one asks. No one goes looking. Not anymore. The priest gives one last sermon, though no one comes. You walk past the chapel that evening and see him sitting alone, hunched in the pews, candlelight flickering against the stained glass. He's not reading, just staring at the altar like it might move if he prays hard enough. That night the dogs begin to vanish. First one, then 3, then all of them. The bolder ones, feral, starving, start prowling the village in packs before they're picked off. No one says what's happening to them, but you see the signs: bones near fire pits, charred fur, scraps hidden under blankets. You can't blame anyone. You thought about it too. You catch your sister staring at the cat once. You don't say anything. She doesn't either, but the next morning the cat's gone, and no one mentions it again. Your mother begins coughing, not a deep rattling sickness, just soft and persistent, like her lungs are giving up. She won't admit it. Still insists on stirring the pot, folding the blankets, mending your socks. But you can see it. She's shrinking. Every day a little less of her left. One night, while you're trying to sleep, you hear her whispering. Not to you, not even to herself. To someone. You catch the words "just one more week" and keep them safe. You pretend to sleep through it, but your eyes don't close. The village decides, quietly, unanimously, not to celebrate Candlemas this year. No wax left. No candles. No sense pretending there's light to bring into the dark. The holiday passes like a ghost. You don't even mark it on the wall. Then, 3 days later, something unexpected happens. A bird. You see it in the trees behind the cottage, a flash of yellow on grey wings, a finch maybe. It hops once, then flutters upward and disappears. You blink, stunned. You haven't seen a bird in weeks, not since the frost took everything. That night the wind shifts. It carries warmth, faint, fleeting but unmistakable, and the smell of soil, damp, rich, alive. You step outside and feel the snow soft under your boots. A drip falls from the eaves and lands on your cheek. Not sharp, not stinging. Wet. The next morning the sun shines. Not weak and ghostly, but real. Golden. Hot on your skin. And just like that, something in you stirs. Not joy. Not yet. But something else. Readiness. Not for a miracle, but for what comes next. It's not spring. Not yet. But it's trying, and you're still here. You stand outside your cottage one morning, boots sunken in half-melted snow, watching your breath dissolve faster than it did just days ago. The cold hasn't vanished. It still clings to the wind, still slips down your collar when you turn your back. But it's changed. Softer. Less cruel. As though it no longer has the energy to fight. You tooth and nail. The sun doesn't just rise now, it lingers. You notice things you'd forgotten, the way it casts long gold streaks on the snow, the way the trees sparkle instead of shudder, the sound of water dripping from branches like distant applause. The world hasn't woken up, but it's stirring, yawning, rolling over. You walk through the village and realise your feet are sinking into mud now, not crunching across frost. Mud. Glorious, messy, life-giving mud. And the birds, there are more. You count 5 before breakfast. Tiny things, puffed up and ragged looking, but alive. Singing even. Off-key, sharp, erratic, like they've forgotten how. But you stand still and listen anyway, soaking it in like you haven't heard music in months. Because you haven't. No one's celebrating, no one dances in the street, but people are outdoors, not huddled by fire pits, not bent double beneath the weight of snow, but upright, moving, walking the paths again, even if the paths are just ribbons of muck between thatched walls. They nod to one another now. Not smile, not wave, but nod, as if to say, I see you. You're still here too? You nod back. You see the toll, though. How could you not? It's etched into the hollow cheeks of neighbours, the slower shuffles of legs once strong, the way even the healthiest among you now carry the faint tremor of someone who's lived too long on broth and hope. Some houses are empty now. Not abandoned, cleared. The doors shut, windows boarded, roofs sagging with silence. You know what's behind them. You helped bury it. You remember every name. There's a list in your head now. The people who didn't make it. Aldrich, the boy lost in the woods. The widow found near the well. Harlan, whose hand still clutches invisible drink. Tiller, whose sled never returned. The woman with the bundle in her arms. The ones no one found at all, the ones who just stopped being seen. And still, you. Your mother sits up straighter these days. Her cough hasn't vanished, but it no longer rattles in her chest like something trying to crawl out. She eats more. You share the last of the yeast with her. She bakes a small, lopsided loaf in the coals, and when you all break off pieces and chew, slowly, reverently, it tastes like forgiveness, like waking up. Your sister sleeps through the night for the first time in weeks. You wake to find her stretched out near the hearth, one arm thrown over her face, snoring softly. There's a bit of colour in her cheeks. Her hands don't tremble when she threads the last of the wool. She even hums again, absently, tunelessly, like she doesn't realise she's doing it. That's how you know she's healing. You've changed too. You walk differently, more guarded, less wasteful in your steps. You eat slower, speak quieter. Your body knows what scarcity feels like now, what silence means. You think of fire differently, water differently, the sky, the ground, the shape of a full belly. You've lost weight, sure. You've lost more than that. But you've also gained something, though you're not sure what to call it. It's not strength exactly. It's knowing. You know now what winter really is. Not just a season, a pressure, a force, a thing that tries to push the life out of you in all the quietest, slowest ways. But it didn't win. You remember the night the stool burned, the day the well froze, the moment the scream came from the woods and no one dared to answer. You remember the howl. You still don't know what it was. Maybe it was wolves, maybe it wasn't. Either way, it didn't get you. That has to mean something. So now, as the snow slumps into puddles and the ground cracks open like a scab loosening, you begin to think forward again. Carefully. Not with hope. Hope is still too expensive. But with intention. With planning. The village gathers near the fields. The soil is black, soggy, rank with rot, but it's visible. Not hidden beneath a crust of death anymore. Tools appear again. Not many. Most were burned. But enough. A few spades. A crooked hoe. The smith reshapes scrap metal into something useful. You see someone unearth an old scythe blade, rusted but intact. A man smiles when it cuts clean through a patch of frostbitten weeds. It will take weeks before the soil is ready. But people are already talking about seeds, about planting, about coaxing life from ground that just a month ago was too hard to bury the dead in. You help clear the last of the ash from your hearth. Wipe down the soot-black walls. Find the spot where your father's chair once sat and press your hand to it. The floor's still warm there. You sit for a moment. Close your eyes. You're not grieving, you're not dreaming, you're just being. Still here. The wind comes through the window. Not sharp, not cruel, just enough to rustle your hair, to make the candle flicker. You look out the window and see the first green shoot. Just one. It's barely taller than your thumb. It could be crushed by a misstep, smothered by one cold night too many. But it's there. And so are you. You made it through the worst winter your village remembers. You froze. You starved. You burned half your home to stay alive. And yet, you are alive. The sky outside has softened. Your sister laughs. You close your eyes. You breathe in. You breathe out. So now you sit. Not on the edge of fear or frostbite, but on the uneven stone step outside your cottage, warmed by a little patch of honest sun. It's not hot, not yet, but the warmth is real, and it soaks into your bones in a way that feels almost suspicious, like you've forgotten how to accept comfort without wondering what it'll cost. But maybe you're allowed to take this one small moment. The village is still quiet, but not the same kind of quiet. This isn't the silence of waiting for death. It's the hush of people breathing at the same time, the pause before the planting begins, before tools hit earth, before hands grow blistered again, not from cold, but from hope. A few children play near the chapel. They're thin, sure, and their clothes don't quite fit anymore, but they're laughing. The sound cuts through the still air like birdsong. You catch your sister watching them, a smile tugging at her mouth that she doesn't even notice is there. The worst of winter is behind you, not erased, not forgotten, just behind. You'll still carry the memories, the hunger, the howl, the cold that made your teeth ache and your thoughts slow. But you'll also carry this after, this spring trying to begin. You reach into your pocket and find a stone your sister gave you. Smooth and flat, marked with a tiny spiral. A token, a charm. You hold it in your palm for a long time, then press it into the earth beside the step. A marker, not of death, but of endurance. The sky above is pale blue. The ground is softening. And for the first time in a long time, the air smells not like fire or fear, but like something growing,